Good morning. It is Thursday, April 18th, and Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. Our topic is housing today. All housing, all the time. My favorite subject.
And our bill got passed out. And as the chair said, 96% of what we wanted.
I heard 94 point whatever, so I don't know who's doing the math, but
It is a small detail.
yeah, exactly. Specific lines in this bill can make a big difference. We are heartened that a lot of our pieces are intact, and we have a good starting place to have this discussion and have it be really meaningful and honest. I didn't want to go in today not being able to say for sure whether or not this conversation would matter in the course of the bill until conference. And I think there's a real openness. There are open questions still in natural resources. They wanted to get it moving to finance and appropriations, but they recognize that this is now our opportunity to respond to what happened and still find more
there's
common
lots of room
ground.
for discussion.
There's lots of room for
So
discussion.
that is encouraging.
Very encouraging. Charlie, you have really been
Hi, Charlie.
praised by a lot of corners for
You're
staying at the center of this and being extremely fair and trying to make things work.
a productive partner.
And that's very appreciated by us as well. So we turn the floor over to you.
Well, I don't know if I deserve any of that, but teamwork makes the dream work. So it's you all know better than I do. But thank you for all your efforts. I think I'm not sure what would be most helpful, but I'll just kind of give you some context of how I guess I'm feeling, and some different aspects of the draft bill as I understand it. And I'm going to just start with just giving you a little bit of background on my career and which will explain some of why I feel about the way I feel. And housing is also my favorite topic, Madam Chair. But before I moved to Vermont and took this job 16 years ago, I worked in Newcastle County, Delaware. And I was the head of what was called the land use department, but it was essentially, if you could think of kind of like Act 250 and municipal zoning all rolled into one. We did all the regulatory review and planning for the highest population county in Delaware. It was over 500,000 people. And one of the things that happened in the early 2000s was we had high real estate values were going up pretty fast, right? And concern about housing affordability, especially for workforce housing at the time, we were calling it, those folks in the 80 to 120% income bracket. And so we worked on legislation there that was really somewhat similar to what we've been talking about in Vermont the last 2 years, which is regulatory changes. We didn't have a lot of money to spend on the issue. And so it was really the last thing I did before I left that job was we got this workforce housing legislation passed. And then I left, right? So I was like, okay, good. I got something done, left. And I went back a year ago for one of my peers' retirement. And I ran into the county council president who was president at the time that I left. And he was still serving on the county council. I asked him how things are going, particularly around this workforce housing program and legislation. And he's an older gentleman, from the city of Wilmington, which was the more lower income urban center. And he said that was the best thing we ever did. He's like, I still go speak at conferences and talk about how we changed housing affordability in our county because of that law. And so I just want you to know that's why I believe so strongly that regulatory changes can make a difference. And that was like the timing, the coincidence of running into him a year ago while you guys were working on the S100 changes, and then having the opportunity over the summer to work on the Act 250 study and the regional planning study and the designation study, and have those studies all come together with recommendations about changing our regulatory system with some tax incentives thrown in through the designation program, have been great. So I just want to give that context to start.
That reminds me, Charlie, if I can interject before I forget, we have Future Trust coming at lunch. I'm having them in this committee room because I don't feel like walking to the pavilion, and I have a rotisserie chicken to share with people. And I co-presented with Pew in North Carolina at CSG, and no one has better data from across the country about how housing vacancy is the metric that reduces homelessness and slows rent increases. So I have asked Natural Resources if they'd also come to that presentation. But you know, I think we're gonna want to talk about that we need housing that's affordable for everyone, and that doesn't mean really just limiting our benefits to perpetually affordable housing in this moment, in this housing crisis. So
Yep.
I hope people join us at lunch for the Pew Charitable Trust. They are really good, and they're going to New Hampshire after this. We haven't had that in our district.
No, that is
You-
great. And thank you for all the work that you're doing on this topic.
Yeah.
So just a handful of points I'll throw out at you, and then I'm going to run. And I apologize for having to leave at 9. But I really do think that now what we have is House Bill 687 really combined with the work that you did in Senate Bill 311. I think we'll really do a lot to address our housing needs for the long term. And is also, I think, very sensitive to keeping the kind of the Vermont brand of our village and urban centers separated by rural countryside. And I think that's really important. Vermont, and we don't necessarily talk in terms like this, but is really, we have a place-based economic development strategy, right? I mean, we really sell the place that we have here, you know, whether it's quaint villages or, you know, beautiful mountains and lakes. And so I think all this legislative work is very supportive of that Vermont brand. The work in the bill is very consistent with the recommendations that did come out of those 3 summer study committees. Oh, geez, now you just made me bigger on my screen. Sorry, that was a lot. So, I'm so sorry. I will try to back up a little bit.
No.
And I think you know, and part of consistent with this is we know we can't spend our way out of this. We're not going to just, you know, pay to buy down the price of housing to make it affordable. The government can't afford to do that. We really need the private sector to respond and build more housing across the spectrum. And I do believe, even in Vermont, that the market will respond to regulatory changes. I'll paint a negative version of that. When Act 250 passed, we saw the rate of rural housing, in other words, people avoiding Act 250 thresholds, doubled in Chittenden County. So kind of, you know, people are trying to get under the regulatory thresholds. And also, in a positive note, I will note, like, what we saw happen in Winooski here, when they got their neighborhood development area designation, which exempted them from Act 250 in parts of the city, and they changed their zoning to increase density and have it be more predictable. They saw a lot more housing development really happen on their what they call their gateway districts. And so I am confident that doing these regulatory changes is going to make a difference in the market. And just a little bit, I'll kind of pull out a few points from the bill, just to draw your attention to them. And thank you for your work on immediate exemptions that were in 311.
I mean, our interim measures.
Yes. Yeah. Or
I think they're calling them triggers or something. Natural resources. I'm gonna stick with
jurisdictional
it.
changes, exemptions. I actually think 687, I think, is calling them interim exemptions.
Oh, good.
But we kind of picked up on what you had proposed there. I encourage you to look at it, because this is one of the sections that got done very recently, and maybe could be improved a little bit. But the interim, well, at least what I've been referring to in my brain is interim tier 1A. And I apologize. Are you all familiar with the 1A 1B, tier 2, tier 3
Well,
concept?
present. Yeah,
Okay.
you were here.
We're dusting off the old memory box here, but
Yeah,
yes.
right. Yeah, right. So what I think of as interim tier 1A right now has is exempting up to 75 units per project within half a mile of downtowns, and it includes, it's kind of based on the more urban designations, the downtowns, growth centers, new town centers, and neighborhood development areas. The interim 1B is up to 50 units within a quarter mile of the village centers. And that's very intentionally trying to be inclusive of towns all across the state. You know, we know we have 200 and I don't know, Alex probably has a stat better than I do, 230, I think, or so village centers that are all over the state. So this is trying to be inclusive of our small towns too. And also, and then there is one provision that got added to that second interim tier 1B category, which was adding the urbanized area in Chittenden County and a quarter mile from the transit routes there. And this is, I think, trying to pick up a little bit on your transportation corridor idea, but also recognizing that within Chittenden County in this interim period, we don't have villages in our, urban area. If the king hadn't drawn those boundaries in 1763, maybe Burlington would have grown to be a city of 120,000 people or so, which is our urbanized area. And so we need to do something a little bit different there and treat that a little bit different because it's crossing a lot of municipal boundaries. But that's the interim. And then also, the priority housing projects, and I apologize because I was not in the room when you were talking about this in 311. I think Senate Natural ended up trying to keep priority housing projects with no cap, thinking like that was another way. And there are projects that are on that track already. You took off the cap, I think, a year or two ago. And it's also does get you 20% of affordable units in those priority housing projects. So I think 687 in the latest version has no cap on those. And then over the next 2 or 3 years, there's kind of a lot of rulemaking, mapping, planning that happens to get to the permanent Act 250 exemptions that are based on municipal and regional plans, paired with updates to the designation program to make it easier for municipalities to access. And the permanent exemptions are full exemption from Act 250 in Tier 1A. And that includes commercial too. So full exemption in Tier 1A. And then permanent exemption in Tier 1B for projects with up to 50 units. So some of the thought, I think, was trying to have a smooth path from where we were or are now when you increased the threshold from 10 to 25 last year, and now ramping that up to 50 or 75, and kind of getting onto a smooth path to where we end up in, maybe 2 or 3 years from now with the permanent exemptions. And then on the flip side, so exemptions in places we want to have growth. And then there's this tier 3 conversation, which has also had a lot of attention. And I know we looked at maps a couple months ago in your committee, and there was a lot of area. If you read the wording that was initially proposed, it was a little scary in terms of how much would have been brought under Act 250 exemption, or I'm sorry, not exemption, jurisdiction, the opposite of exemption. And I think what the language in 687 now is a pretty thoughtful approach to tier 3, and just it's going to go to rulemaking, but asking whether or how different resources should be included in tier 3. And obviously that will be an important debate, but we'll take some time on that. And then
I don't want to lose you before you're our regional planner in the room. And I think there's just this kind of philosophical difference in how we were envisioning this, where every map started with the municipality. And even that concerns me for places that I think will do the opposite of, what I want, but natural resources were worried they might do the opposite of what they want. And I still think it's fairer to let the municipalities go first with guidance. I mean, you were in
You sold
natural
us on that.
resources. I heard a lot of rural folks say, don't resign us to death as a community, basically. How do you see municipalities sort of having input on tier 3 before they're just told you can't touch this without Act 250?
Yeah, I think the tier 3 conversation. I do encourage municipalities to work with their regional planning commission, because I think their individual regional planning commissions could be somewhat of an advocate for them in the state rulemaking process. But if the environmental board, or I think maybe Senate Natural Resources changed the name of the board to the Land Use Review Board, but whatever that board is called that is doing rulemaking, it's obviously going to be really important to participate in that. And be thoughtful.
Communities often have the hardest time doing that. I mean, as they said, there are a lot of volunteers who are aging and they don't, this is Starkspur.
And that's why I kind of offer, I think the regional planning commission staff can be of assistance to those volunteers, aging or not. But I'm sorry, Senator Clarkson.
Yeah, no, Charlie, it can be. They must be. This is what we're helping finance in the bill. This is a partnership that has to be. You sold us on this, building this from the ground up.
Charlie is just the messenger.
I know, but we need to own it. It's not encouraging our PCs to work with our towns. They must work with our towns, because if we're gonna trust that we're gonna begin ground up and our towns need somebody to be working with, even if they're just overseeing it with the towns that are perhaps have more capabilities than others. It can't be read encouraged. It is a partnership that must be. And I think that the tier, even with tier 3, every town wants to protect part of its town. I mean, there isn't a town that doesn't treasure some of it, a lot of the green space that's already going to be identified in tier 3.
Right.
So I think with all the tiers, it really has to be people, the town has to buy into it. And I just think that's an essential piece of this work. And
do you have language? We're talking to Ellen, but we're looking for places where we can just cement that common ground between our committees. And this is one where I think we want to make sure that towns feel like they're in, the driver's seat as the process unfolds. I wrote down all my concerns. That's why my computer's open by section. So it's probably changed, but there was an appeal all the way to the Supreme Court just for one tier.
I'm not as familiar with the appeals process, so I don't know that I can speak to that.
Okay. It was in 687 as it came over. I think 1B could be appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, and I just want to see where that went.
I think that was probably tier 1A. Definitely something to look at. I have not spent a lot of time looking at that section.
Okay. Why don't you spend the last 5 minutes? We have a question, and we really want to hear, where you think the nuance lies for change that balances our priorities.
Yeah,
and I think.
Charlie, this is Wendy Harrison. I was gonna just bring a couple of things for light, which we don't need to discuss now, but I want to make sure that they're in the final bill. But the substantial regional impact, I didn't see that. I didn't see really strong language about a process to deal with developments that have impacts outside of a town. I think that's really important.
Oh, you need to have regional impact.
Yeah. So I think that's and then just the transitioning from Act 250, because current Act 250 permits have conditions that on items that towns don't, in some cases, they're not allowed to regulate, like transit, for example. So I don't want that to get lost in the conversation. So if when towns have this authority, they need to be able to have many of the same authorities that agencies have under Act 250, like V-Trans, for example, because V-Trans looks at Act 250 permits, but they don't necessarily, other than that 1111, look at town permits. But the town needs to have that authority but it will be a longer conversation. But I just want to make sure you're thinking of that.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
all talk about that at some point.
Yeah, I worry about, I know there was this like, help Keisha not look at a graffiti covered Pizza Hut anymore or whatever piece that went into the bill.
Some of those are really important.
Yeah, but they do exist also, you know, like
Yeah.
I don't want other communities to get lost. Like I want to make sure this is a bill that's statewide.
Right.
And so I'm gonna look
Right.
to you know, you're another urban center at the other side of Vermont. So
Well, and no, as far as I know, no other towns have this ability. It's not just us.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think with my last couple of minutes here, there are some leaps of faith here, right? But I don't think they're brand new leaps of faith. Like we have been trusting municipalities to regulate with exemptions for downtown areas and neighborhood development areas. You know, we're kind of building on exemptions that have been occurring. You know, we've been piecemeal giving exemptions over the last 20 years with these different designations. So, to me, this is just kind of okay. Now let's play that out, and really trust municipalities and our villages to regulate. Senator Harrison, you bring up, I don't know if there are some areas, where there may be gaps. I think we are losing the Act 145 provision that is V-Trans's leverage through Act 250 to get developer contributions to some transportation improvements. But in talking with V-Trans, it doesn't seem like it was a lot of money that they were raising that way. And so I'm not sure that that's a significant issue. There are certainly other issues, and you can see them addressed in some of the criteria for the tiers, like concern about environmental and historic preservation and things that happen at a state level that aren't happening at the municipal. And so having said that, I'm going to lay one big stinky thing on your plate for a future thinking about, which is that we really don't have a system of integrated permitting in Vermont. We have municipal permitting and we have state permitting. The municipal and state permitting do not talk to each other, except a little bit in Act 250. Where I used to work, we had a more integrated system where, like this town could ask for the DOT or A&R to weigh in to the municipal permit process. That's really not allowed in Vermont. It's not enabled. And it's something I think we may need to think about as this process plays out. And I don't know, Senator Harrison, if that was fully addressing your issues, but same thing.
Yeah, I'm more alarmed. So thank you very much for bringing that. It's not just transit, which, by the way, needs a lot more funding. But it's also housing. It's affordable housing is also part of some of those permits. And there may be other things. So those are just the two that I have particular knowledge of. But we need to know that.
Yeah, and the big picture here is really we're trying to encourage housing in the right places that I do think support our other goals, right? Whether they be transit goals, transportation goals, greenhouse gas goals, smart growth goals, rural preservation. So I am also very hopeful that as we get more housing in our villages and downtowns, that will help support goals, and we'll see how the market responds. This is really kind of a test of the market. So my last point would be, I hope that you get data in front of you every year to see how well this is working and see if we're really addressing, the housing and economic challenges that your committee addresses.
We love data. And I think we'll want to get to that. We'll want to get to that in terms of PHPs, because I just don't think there's enough of them to make a dent in the housing crisis as the only people who have a large exemption. Senator Cummings.
Think as we're doing this, we need to remember that what we've always been told is it's not Act 250 that's the problem. Local planning and zoning is the hardest to get through. And we have had a long term, I've been on committees 30 years ago, trying with regional planning, trying to get towns to take affordable housing.
Right.
And that resistance isn't gonna go away.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I think
Yeah.
your committee has done a lot of work on that in last year and this year. And that is a good issue. And I apologize. I really do have to run now. My other meeting's
Thanks,
starting, so thank
Charlie.
you. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Alex, you can take the witness here, like, I'm really interested in like positive outliers, and I could be wrong, but I became convinced that the wastewater folks are doing a good job, that they're just kind of, we keep the statewide system to double check on the communities that have their own wastewater systems, but it doesn't become a cumbersome duplicative process necessarily. We were ready to strike that duplication, and I think we became convinced that it's good to have a statewide look. And the local wastewater folks can go to ANR for support. So I would like us in the fall to just look at how we create that integration.
Yeah.
I
We're
think,
talking integrated permitting stuff,
yes,
as I think that's a great next step.
I like that. That sounds very positive.
Thank you, Charlie, again, for positive.
Right, can I just?
Yeah, sure.
So in Act 250 right now, sometimes there will be different divisions or departments of A&R.
Mhm.
Where I heard about it happening mostly, where one department wants one thing that's in conflict with what another department wants. So I believe that.
At the municipal level,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah, I have
ADA and historic
personally been
preservation.
through-
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
By one department, if you do what the other department tells you, we won't give you a permit.
Yes,
Right,
The other,
right.
yeah.
So right now, the Act 250 district, I believe, makes that choice or handles that conflict. But I don't know who's gonna handle that under the
We
new
weren't Act 250.
mechanism, because
Yeah. We need Sabina in the room, I think, because I think it's uneven.
don't have that.
I think some district coordinators, or people go to their district coordinator, but I think that's an informal process. It's not like district coordinators are known as the tiebreakers, so.
But I'm not saying the district coordinator, the
Yeah.
district committee, or maybe I said that, but I believe it's part of the Act 250 permit. And the district commission votes on which one wins, basically.
Let's look at that in our
We need
integrated.
to, we
permitting
really need to
conversation.
know that,
You
because
should get
that's,
Teal or Spina.
yeah, that's gonna
Mhm.
cause pretty big problems if we don't look at it in advance.
We'll bookmark that for Sabina.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Commissioner.
Hi.
Welcome.
Long time no see.
I know, I had a blonde here yesterday, that's right.
I feel
There was
like,
a gap where I didn't see you all.
You were here.
Must have been nice for you.
I feel like that got remedied in the hallways.
That's true, I tend to bounce around. Alex Farrell, Commissioner, Department of Housing and Community Development. So, all right, H687. So Charlie hit on a couple points that I would have brought up, but,
By the way, I am keeping a spreadsheet of everything because
you are, okay.
I think I would have a hard time anyway, but baby brain is real. If someone's gonna ask me next year what we did and why we did it, and
Well,
you writing things down.
I'll also just say,
I did a big integrated permitting.
Right,
here.
I'm just right.
oh, well, yeah, that's, so we're working on, the administration's working on putting together, I'd say a memo, you'd be one of the committees that would receive this, that would outline some of the areas that we'd still like to see changed in H687. I'm gonna walk through a lot of those
Yeah.
today, but just to note, there's gonna be things that ANR would bring up, that NRB would bring up, that I might not touch on today, so don't think that what I'm saying is a holistic list, but I can hit on some things. So, firstly, I think Senator Cummings, before we started, you were mentioning, what were some of the wants that were being expressed with, and a lot of those, basically what was in S311, have now, I'd say 90-ish% have now been
Oh,
moved
it's gotten
into.
lower and lower.
H6, H7.
percent.
Well, it
It's
depends on who's
by
doing it.
importance, not by
Yes.
like number of lines.
I think that's,
Got
and that missing piece will be the second thing I talk about here. So depending on how you value that missing piece, number could fluctuate.
But we can stop and celebrate that there's agreement
I
on a lot
think-
of areas.
I
Yes.
think that's
Oh.
a good thing.
Definitely, that's how we began.
That's a good way to start before I start like just chiseling away here. So I just need to set the table with the fact that appeals under 687 would still now be diverted to this new board is just a non-starter. There's a hard line. And for one big reason being that that's gonna bifurcate appeals, not just municipal appeals and Act 50 appeals, but also any of your A and R permits. Now, that would still, those A and R permits would still be getting appealed to the environmental court. And so you'd be going through two different paths, and so that could really complicate things for builders, affordable housing developers. So
Can you
Yeah.
pause on that?
So good.
Sure.
I guess so what you're saying is there hasn't been enough refinement so that you choose one or the other path, or the path is chosen for you. You could end up in both now.
I think very much you could.
Okay.
And there's really no refinement that I've seen or any discussion, my colleagues back here can correct me. I don't think there's been any discussion of municipal permitting appeals going to this new
Yeah.
board. And so in any case, you could end up where, okay, you've done your municipal permitting, you've gotten that gets appealed. You have to go, all right, you've dealt with months of appeals, you get through that. Now you come back and go to your Act 250 permit. When that gets appealed, you are now, you don't get to go through that same environmental court where you already hashed out some of these issues. You have to go to a new board, which could take another 6, 8 months, however long, even if it's quicker than the environmental court. So that's big concern for
Yeah.
us.
So
And
that,
they could change it too, excuse me, if
Exactly.
the Act 250 determination, not the LRB or LR. If that has a different solution than what was in the municipal
Mhm.
permit, they had to go back to the municipal.
And
Yeah.
now that your project is different, you could use these.
Yeah, and not just appeal, you need more permitting, you probably have
That's
to go
right.
back to permitting.
so it strikes me that actually is a solvable problem.
Yes.
I think this is a solvable piece and I just think.
Yeah, and I will say, I had a brief conversation with Senator Bray where he had been enchanted by the idea of the New Hampshire Housing Board of Appeals,
Right.
et cetera. But when I at least let that go, it was because in New Hampshire, they choose.
That's right.
The defendant chooses. And we weren't ready to say that the defendant chooses, and so we didn't have a new pot of money for a new board. I know Senator Gray wants to build in housing specialists to the
ERB.
ERB, as it would be called. But it's really our jurisdiction to say, you can't make people go through multiple processes
Yeah.
at the same time that are conflicting, and thus the housing does not get built.
And
Yeah, we need one appeals funnel that does, I mean, that was what was so great about New Hampshire. It's one appeals process. And that if we're, the whole objective of some of this, well, for me, is simplification and clarity. And one appeals board is what I hoped we were all rowing towards.
right.
So I still think we can probably get
I
there.
think
We can.
we can build common ground here.
Oh, my.
I think there are unintended consequences.
And this is coming from you.
And you
Yep.
have,
Hey, you're coming here first too.
Well,
And Magali, is this a
I'm
She's
getting-
highlighted?
in possession today.
I'm getting,
Uh,
I don't.
Is that so?
Should I
Okay.
get the highlighter?
no, that's okay.
Not yet, it doesn't pass.
I can point to.
I, at some point, would like to highlight it.
Okay.
Oh, great.
I think do people want these copies? Then we'll get highlighted ones just
No,
because.
you know what would be
Ellen
also
sent
helpful
it.
would be a summary.
I have one of those coming. Ellen made one.
Ellen is a dream, this happened last night, so.
This, I just wanna know, this
This is big.
Well, I know it's big, but where is it in the process? Has this been voted out by natural?
It was
Yes.
voted out 5-0. They have,
Conditionally.
they have an amendment coming on, as I understand it, that we will get to have input around where they have unanswered questions.
Right.
That they didn't get to, but they wanted to get this moving to finance and appropriation.
Is Chris coming to present those questions to us? How is that formally happening?
We can ask for that. We hadn't gotten that far. I think I need to talk to the chair and the pro temp about
How
how
that
that happens.
happens, yeah.
I might say, this is not my call, but procedurally, it'd be easier for us if it's split up into multiple different amendments, so we could weigh in on those. And
Right.
perhaps some we could get on board with, perhaps some we'd have to.
Yeah, of course, just goes through
Yeah.
regs.
Yeah,
Some of us like to have both.
We've noticed that with this bill.
Well, yeah, this maybe wasn't, this wouldn't have been my first choice, but anyway, we are where we are.
Yes, I have just as much information as everybody else on the path, but it comes to finance, this comes to finance today. And we will have the opportunity for input. Are we getting the highlighted copies?
I'm looking at for.
Okay,
Oh, she's,
I
we
just-
may not have one.
we really need to know
Finance,
everything that
everything-
changed.
Everything in here, we have the property transfer tax.
We have to do that in finance. That
Yeah,
is,
That's what I'm asking.
yes.
How much
It
of
is
this am I, because I've been told to start the yield bill before. it
Right.
gets-
So
so
it hasn't been, has it been fully voted out of committee?
It's out of committee, it should be on the floor today, I'm supposed to get it Tuesday, Wednesday next week.
Is it a function?
Magali, I just
I
emailed
have
you.
no idea.
Oh, thanks, I also.
Oh, you got it.
Thank you.
I'm
Yeah.
anticipating floor amendments.
just so everyone knows, because even other senators are asking me, I was able to talk to Senator Kitchell about how she's pulling in various bills and trying to true it all up in the budget. So that back and forth had to take place, and then you and I can craft the amendment that starts in finance. Because people will want to start to see where appropriations are living
Okay,
in the,
there is a property transfer change, hours for this committee.
In
in
here.
This bill,
that, but the appropriations will also need to go in
Yes.
finance.
in finance.
Just because we want to get it in as soon as we can so people see what we're proposing.
And then it will go.
Oh, you're gonna put an appropriation in finance and then it will go to appropriations.
That's the current
Okay,
plan. As far
I
as
just
know
need to know what I'm supposed to do.
it. Yeah, I just told the vice chair of appropriations, he's like, I don't see this appropriation, because the appropriations have all been stripped out. But we had a presentation on what's going to be funded through the property transfer tax, because Senator Kitchell's also has funding elsewhere for certain pieces that were in our appropriations. So we're living within the general fund dollars generated by the property transfer tax.
Which is pretty modest.
And maybe this is, I think the appropriations are still in this version.
They're just gonna change.
They're
They're,
yes,
yeah, like
yeah.
for all intents and purposes, they're not. But
Yeah, right.
most of the items, most of the line items exist.
Right, cause
They
I
just
saw
have
that
to
they
be
don't
made
match up with
Yeah.
what approach
Right.
has, so, okay, perfect, that's good for us to know.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's,
So appeals,
That's
the first
appeals.
big is the,
Mhm.
you gotta unify them.
yeah,
Have one.
so. And really our resolution to that is the route you all chose, which is let's add another judge to the environmental court.
Yep.
And then there are other parameters that you all set out around, them having goals. Here's when we'd like you to set these, and please prioritize house appeals. So that's our preferred route here. Okay, so that's appeals. Move down to the interim exemptions that are currently in this bill, so that could be on page 59.
I think it was like page 2 for us or something.
Yeah. And so Charlie hit these at a high level. But so I'll say what they are and then we can come back. So in here, it's cap, an exemption up to 75 units. This is gonna be within designated downtowns, plus a half mile
So
around.
this is tier one A?
This is just the interim exemptions for now.
Oh, right,
We're not gonna.
right, got it, that's it, sorry.
Okay. Can we start on the bottom of page 57,
Sure, absolutely.
at least for us, because this looks like a full exemption in tier 1A, but
Yeah.
I'm
once
just wondering,
it
a
exists.
quarter mile from downtown, that doesn't help the gentleman that wants to put the housing, he's been in and testified, wants to put the housing
Right.
out Route
Right.
2
Mhm.
by the creamy stand, because that's probably a half mile. Cause there's a
Right.
cemetery and a grave.
But you're a different type of downtown, I think they're two differentiated towns, so
that I
one
think-
half mile on one.
I think people are considering that 1B.
I think that's a half a mile, or that would be,
Well, let's
Or-
look at these, the legal eye here, 'cause
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time.
I need.
Well, and
yeah, so I don't know.
And what I might do is defer to ledge council. to do
Yes,
an actual
okay.
walkthrough, But I can say, so you're right, so if you were to start, so.
Yeah,
Some of these exemptions, they would no date, so they would be immediate, but, and the tiers come in separately. But, you know, if you go down, so let's say at the bottom of page 58, this is just in this broad exemptions
Mhm.
section, so if you look at lines 15 through 17, that's where the exemption for the hotel motel conversions is that you all had in 311.
okay.
And then there's also the ADU exemption right below that
Until 2027.
until 2027. So that's a good segue before we keep going here to a theme that it is just sort of a blanket, just a timeline. So the NRB provided you all with a timeline that I think you based your sunset. And that really has the interim exemptions going out to 2029. A couple of these, like the no permit for ADUs, I love that to have no sunset. But
Right, that was supposed to be by right, and even. So
I think that was the.
yeah, Representative Baumgart's gave us the by right language. Did that change in 687? Does anybody know? Or that was a change made by Natural
We
Resources?
all know.
Yeah.
Megan Sullivan, Chamber of Commerce, on Chamber of Commerce. The natural resource, sorry, I didn't not get to copy. The Senate Natural Resource Committee put the sunset on there. They had concerns or questions, maybe more appropriate, about could a builder build just under the units that would have triggered Act 250 and then double it by adding ADUs, which really is just doubling the number of units and calling them ADUs, and how do you avoid that? And started going down a rabbit hole, and so put a sunset in, but I think would be, I don't wanna speak for them, but you all had probably more conversation about that may alleviate those concerns that
Yeah.
we just need to hear.
And among that, I point out that there's a statutory definition of ADU.
Right.
This rely on some things.
That's helpful.
That's me.
No, not you.
Everyone's a messenger here.
For them to provide when you talk to your colleagues. and
Yeah.
all. All right, Megan Sullivan's gonna be our reference point for any of our. In lieu of that county. But, and apologies, I'm trying to stick thematic here so that we don't get.
Yeah, we
too
appreciate
lost.
that. No, we have Ellen coming in to go through that. Right.
Okay, so on the interim exemptions, it's 75 units in designated downtowns. They did give that half mile around. And new town centers and growth centers and neighborhood development areas. So basically everything except a village center, it's a 75 unit exemption. With the exception that that does not apply in river corridors and wetlands. I think that's a reasonable carve out, but it should be noted that a lot of those designated areas are gonna have a
Yeah.
massive swath
Yeah.
of floodplain, so that's
Yeah.
gonna chop up a lot of those areas. And we're already only talking about 0.3% of the landmass in the state, and there's very
Yes.
little risk. These are areas that we've already looked at, the state has.
The land use is not in question.
Land use isn't in question, these aren't critical resource areas.
No,
So
Yeah.
the reason I say that is, I don't see value in a 75 unit cap there. on these interim exemptions,
Right.
those should be a full exemption for residential development.
Yeah.
No cap.
And that's still a concession from where the stakeholder group got to with
Right.
no Act 250 in those
That's-
designated
that's
areas for commerce of any kind.
We're saying just
This
residential.
is housing that we need.
So that's what I would advocate for.
I mean, listen, if we could get the whole thing back, but we'd
Right.
be making a concession still.
But if we're talking
The need.
vibrant downtown.
Right.
There has to be jobs somewhere in
Right.
the area, so people have the money to shop downtown. Just
That's
building housing in isolation.
Yeah. Senator, I mean, no.
Hey now.
That's a demotion. Megan.
I would say the tier 1A,
Yeah,
which will be mapped,
Yeah.
does have full exemption for
Right.
so they're
Commercial,
expecting that
industrial
to
housing.
move quickly.
2026 is when applications would start.
Right.
Once the maps are available.
Right. I still
So this
think-
is the interim.
Yes.
I mean,
And I know
We're on
you're,
board.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. No, that's, it's helpful.
Yeah.
We know where these designated areas are.
Yeah.
And, you know, we know that there's not a land use question
Right.
there, so I think we can advocate that and PHPs are just so limited.
Yes.
They require a lot of investment that we don't have this year, even though we put more money in our bill for FY 25 for housing,
A
nobody
lot
has
of
this
this
money.
is good. But we don't have the money. right
Yeah.
now to do the infrastructure.
Right.
The water.
Yes.
Sewer is the
Yeah.
big
The
one.
feds do though, and the interplay of what's available federally with the infrastructure bill is
The only large PHP moving is the Middlebury one, requiring significant ARPA dollars. That could be in jeopardy because they got pulled back into Act 250 for technical subdivision language. So we can't have this.
And do you remember that yesterday I briefly brought up Build America, Buy America?
Yeah.
They're also having complications potentially with
Right.
that because we, CDBG, wanted to contribute to the project and we
Right.
were able to even forward commit to get them 1.25 million. But the second portion of that, so we split it up into 500 grand, 750 grand, so that we can forward commit. That 750 grand would trigger BABA for everything. And so that would just send costs through the roof. And so now they're having to really think hard about how they can rework things to make it work. Or there's a potential they could say, we can't accept this amount
Yeah.
of money because it's not working. So
There's so many strings attached, and it's really our jurisdiction that we've understood what PHPs are vis-a-vis the need for all housing. And I think we're gonna ask for a change here.
so. Help me
Yeah.
clarify that, 75 units, do they have to be PHPs or can they be
that's
No.
just 75 years.
periods? So
That's
it's-
75 units.
So would we wanna be asking for PHPs and 75?
Well,
No.
I think the
Okay.
what we would advocate for is just a full exemption.
Right.
In
Right.
those areas.
If they even have to get a JO, if they have to
That's
go and have this conversation, they find something. They just found it with a PHP that we tried to exempt.
Right.
So we need full certainty that they don't have to go through a year-long process just to be told they are okay.
Yes.
We need that for housing right now
And
in our designated area.
the way I see this too is that actually acts as an incentive for these communities to strive towards that longer term
Exactly,
because
yeah.
they're gonna see what they can get
Mhm.
once they have these exemptions.
Right.
And they're not gonna, as soon as the sunset hits, which by the way, we'd advocate for a 2029 sunset. But as opposed to 27 as carved out here,
Oh, they took it back to 27, we
So-
take it to 29.
they pulled everything back to 27, I think based on the timeline that they're envisioning, which we think is far too short. We don't see it as realistic, nor does ANR and NRB.
Yeah.
So may I just clarify that
Mhm.
these are the very few designated downtowns that right there, how many, they're just
So if it's
Full.
25,
full designated downtowns are just 25 towns.
that's right. But to be fair, this also includes new town centers, which I believe we have 2. Growth centers, which there are a few, and then designated neighborhood areas. So that only tacks on a few more areas, but but yes, it's still a relatively small number, whereas village centers where you get the big number, that's the.
Right, the village centers we were just about to get to.
That's
Right, but
It's-
that category, those are the places where it's obvious to everybody that there should be
That's right.
More.
development, there's no, because some of the village centers get
Yeah.
hard, but
Oh,
but
what's-
those areas are
And
obvious
they
to
do, they
everybody.
do, so they put a 4 mile band around village centers, is that right?
Oh, no, that's way big. It's a
Is
quarter
that what
mile.
Charlie said?
A quarter.
It's a-
Oh,
I think it's a quarter.
I was like, whew, okay.
Oh, he
No,
got
no,
us.
that would
A
get.
fourth of a mile, oh,
Yes.
That would get into other villages.
And the quarter mile, as you may remember back earlier in the session, I referred to the planning buffer, which for downtowns, new towns, and recall.
especially with river corridors now.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So,
So we're not picking up the whole.
I thought it was 4 miles, but
I
I,
think they're gonna be
That'd be
flexible.
fine.
yeah.
We have to build in language that makes the quarter of a mile flexible depending on the terrain.
and we do that on the, and
Yeah.
so I would recommend that absolutely.
Yes, I
because-
think that has to be, or we're gonna be stuck.
Yeah, so,
Housing increase.
so you're right, so those first group of designated areas, to me, there should be no question that that should just be a full exemption for residential development, and,
Mhm.
yeah, so then moving on
But
to.
it's requiring water, sewer, some water, one or the other, right?
Well, now we're just talking about the biggest.
That's
That's,
already,
it's
yeah,
not saying that in this.
and that's
I thought we were
already,
on village.
Somewhere else it's saying that, but aren't we on interim housing, except like
We're-
line
Yes.
5, page
I was
59?
gonna send Senator
Yeah.
Chittenden for a tutorial, because half of my committee is here.
I know,
and
right?
half is on natural resources,
poor
and
Tom.
Chittenden is hanging out there.
Chittenden
So
is-
rather than
It's
have
true.
all of us go through all of this, in
I'll take him for
minutia,
coffee.
if you can
Yeah.
talk to Senator Chittenden, that would
He was-
be helpful.
He was my professor in college, so this is payback, I'm gonna take him right into the
Okay,
lead,
that's good.
and then I'm
That's
gonna
fair.
test him on it.
Right,
We'll
right.
see how it goes.
Plus he'll say,
That
I'll
would
just
really,
listen to
that
my
would help with the
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
That would really help with the process.
I'd be happy to.
Because everybody else has been through this in one form or another.
Any chance to school a former teacher?
I didn't realize I was setting up that. That's what I said.
That's
Do you see what he did?
Mhm.
So that's a note
But-
to
I'll
add,
apologize.
taking into
Flexibility.
consideration geographic challenge.
Yes,
Yes.
raise that there.
So then the second batch here on the interim exemptions, I'm gonna parse into two, and I'm gonna just talk about the village centers first, because you can see this language that Charlie mentioned that they added, that's gonna be at the top of page 60, lines 1 through 4, transit routes for urbanized areas.
Yeah.
We're supported, but I'm just gonna talk about that separately from village centers for a second. So just looking at village centers with permanent bylaws, it would be an extension up to 50 units. Again, I see this as an opportunity for a much broader, I'd say, full exemption, because we're still talking about areas where it's not gonna be a critical resource area. We've already looked at these areas. There's opportunities for you to carve out other protections for this, such as requiring municipal water and wastewater. I think, or sufficient soils to me. I just say full exemption in these
Mhm.
areas as the interim exemptions. Oh, the
The
highlight,
communities have, they've gotten designation, they have enough capacity in their village center to know if they have the proper wastewater or not. And that's a separate permit.
That's-
Sections.
Because this isn't subject to the 5-5, right? To the time
Well,
and
that's right,
distance.
yeah,
Then somebody could build 75 units and then build another 75 units next to it. A developer could phase this.
that's right, that's right.
So
But-
it's not as scary,
Just to be.
it's
Yeah.
not as meaningful.
That's right, and but also, and I'd say on top of that, that's why that sunset is gonna be important of 29
Totally.
instead of 27. 27, we're giving people a pretty short runway.
Right.
To build anything,
Yeah,
I mean.
I don't know how you
with
do that.
including.
No, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
to complete or to initiate.
probably to get a J. Is that?
Well, the JO is a whole other thing that we.
That JO's definitely took into the following year, I mean,
Yeah.
But
yeah,
So that is another thing that we're talking.
Yeah.
I have
The
the
JO we need to talk about.
I would say regardless, sunset of 29 on that is gonna be.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to flag.
And
The
we could
sunset
probably-
has to go to 29.
We could probably say 29 or earlier if blank exists.
Are we
Like
still on
if the,
transit corridors?
We
No,
haven't gotten there yet.
no, we're on.
We can continue to talk about it if we pushed it to a date certain because you can't presuppose what's gonna happen in a future legislature. So
sure,
2029 just feels like certainty for people.
Yeah.
I've said my biggest goal is to not come back next year and say we didn't do enough, that no housing was created. And so we're taking out little complications that just make a developer concerned that they need a JO, that they have to, like, you should know, I'm doing this many units, I'm exempt.
right. Just one, is the intent of the limit so that it matches the implementation of the new system.
I think that was the goal with the 50, identifying 50, because they're trying to make it relevant to what tier 1 be eventually.
Right, so until those tiers are implemented, that's when we need the exemption. So if we could tie it to that, I think that would make sense, but
Right.
we'll talk about that more later.
Yeah,
Because that's that's the interim period, we just don't know where it's gonna end, so we can say 2029 or if,
Earlier.
if the tiers are implemented.
Yeah, I agree.
mhm. We'll work on whatever we can, that's a kind of drafting question.
Yeah,
but I
okay,
hear you.
okay.
We tried to do that, even 687, I think, tried to do that originally, and
Yeah.
it's hard,
Yeah,
and I don't think this is gonna be done in 2027.
But also
I'd be happy to
no,
go.
I totally agree with it,
Yeah.
should be.
but the floodplain carve out here, I'll just note, will actually probably wipe, that was wrong. Will occupy the entire area of certain village
Well,
centers.
Montpelier is a good example.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, yeah.
But let's just,
Well,
I
let's
met
look.
last night with Andy first,
Southern
I met
Vermont's a
with
great
the
example.
Montpelier businesses, downtown businesses, and it was, that they're concerned about
Yeah.
that for good reason. I mean,
Well, and it's.
But they're also
logical.
concerned about the next one.
So it's
But
a
we
logical
shouldn't-
carve out, it's a very logical carve out, it's just something to consider when we're talking about, 230 something village centers, well, not really.
Right.
Right.
So then separately, let's talk about this transit route, language, so that's gonna be top of page 60, everyone now has their highlighted version, so you can see it, but so Charlie had this, and I think briefly spoke to it. And so this would capture, transit routes. I picture this being like a Shelburne Road, Williston Road.
I'm thinking very Hilly Road.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking Putney Road.
this was specified Chittenden County.
This-
I just don't know that that's
So-
a good idea.
I think that's something to really take a look at.
Rutland has one.
I think so Charlie drew up this language, but I think some weigh in from some other RPCs could help you make this a little bit more Vermont centric, not Chittenden centric.
Mhm.
But we don't like the strip malls.
We hate them.
But if you put, but they're built along the road, which is the
Right.
only place to build in Vermont.
This is our strip repair.
This
If
is
you
strip
put
repair.
housing in
Mhm.
there,
Yeah.
then you have a connecting corridor between Barry and Montpelier.
They wrote this for my commute on Route 7.
Yeah.
I just wanna name that, like, it's concerning, it's flattering or something, but it's very concerning because we've been talking about, was it what was in Brattleboro?
Putney Road?
Yeah, Putney Road, Barry Montpelier,
Route 5.
we know where these
McDonald's
are.
is.
Route 5 is.
And limiting it to Chittenden County is,
Yeah,
it's not like we're the only place that has a populated strip.
I think.
Corridor.
Look at Rutland, look at
It
Rutland.
has,
No, and we've already, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I'd say, we have the express care down there, you have food stores, and
Right.
you have. The building that's going on around here is at the Berlin Mall, the Berlin, what are we calling it now? Commerce and Community Center or something. But we're putting some big apartments up there, affordable apartments. But Berlin they're calling this their new town center, but it's the old mall.
Mm-hmm.
it'll be called.
But the other half of Berlin, you go a half a mile down the hill, literally, you've got another commercial center, which has mass transit going through it.
Right.
And you could put housing in there. And
I think we need to parlay this into a permanent exemption that someone can apply for. And you can say like, we know it when we see it, you know?
Yeah.
I know that's subjective, but
But a transit corridor exemption.
yeah, I think we know that they exist and they're not just in Chittenden County.
and we have a bike lane,
Right.
we have buses.
What page, Alex?
So we're at the top of page 60.
Never seen anybody on a bike.
And Brattleboro has already zoned for this
Mhm.
redevelopment
Yeah.
and putting housing in commercial areas.
Right.
So it is desired in some places.
So perhaps there's room to say, I mean, first of all, the number of residents
Huge
could change and help with this. They gave us
Yeah.
language to work within. But I think we need to articulate that this is a category you can receive.
Yeah.
Moving, a designation you can receive moving forward, and that the municipalities know where they have this.
Did they,
It's within a half is it half mile, a quarter mile on either side of that
So,
transit route.
Yeah.
take this into account in the designation or transit corridors? I don't think they did. It's not.
Everyone was like, yeah, that would be good.
Yeah,
But no,
Chris
the
is-
planners really wanted this, actually.
Yeah, it's great. We're talking about transit.
I defer to
it's just like anything that.
Charlie or others on that.
It's been discussed and nobody could sort out language, so they were like,
So it's not.
what is having over 7 in between Shelburne and Burlington? But even if it starts with that, I think we need to turn it into a designation category that someone can receive. We have a lot of scenic byways that have strip clustering that they know within this quarter mile, we want to fix this and not just have a dollar store and a hardware store.
And it might end up being in the tier 1A.
Could be tier 1A or tier 1B, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so let's
I've
chat
written
about
that
this. This
down.
is another star.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
see.
another star.
I see Ellen here, so I wanna make sure I make a couple of points
Yes.
before I wrap up. So I'd say recap on the interim exemptions, what we would rather see is within designated areas, full exemption. And then beyond, so right now, the transit route is the only thing that goes beyond designated areas in terms of interim exemptions. It excludes what you all did, which was take into account municipal water and wastewater areas, which had exemptions up to a cap of 30, that you settled on.
yeah, tier 2, we differentiated between zoning and no zoning.
Right,
Which
so,
I think still needs to be.
So I-
Did they hold on to that?
but I would advocate for, an exemption with a certain cap, whether that's 30, 50, whatever it is, that's outside of these other identified areas for the interim exemptions, but is in an area served by municipal water and wastewater, which would revert back closer to what you all did in S 311. I think that is really important, because it goes back to the premise of what we were trying to do, which is maximize that built infrastructure and the investment in the community made.
Right.
So that's where we're at, broad strokes on the interim exemptions. So going into the more originally 687 pieces, looks like tier 1A starts in section 34, but I'm just gonna make a couple of specific notes. So let's go to page 51. And you will see there's language around planning for, if you go to the bottom, I guess, bottom of 51, top of 52.
I just wanna say, as I understand it, we're looking at highlighted changes from 687.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we still have to I'm counting on Senator to help us look at every line for like where we had something and now there's 3 different versions of the language, so.
And Ellen, these are the changes from 3.1 to 4.1, correct, that are highlighted in.
I don't know what you guys are doing, I just got here.
So-
We have draft 4.1 highlighted. Are the highlights just from 3.1 to 4.1?
I don't know what time is, I.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
They have the clean copy and then they also have the highlighted copy, draft 4.1, that was on the. So. Okay,
Mhm.
so, so there are 2 drafts 4.1, Ellen Tchaikovsky, yes, the highlighting in the 320 version is the changes from draft 3.1. And then the 503 version is the edited version,
Okay,
that has additional, because if Bill was at the editor's wall, this is all.
got it. So there were no substantive changes made between this draft and the final one?
Yeah.
It's just editing?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So we'll keep up the.
Yeah, I just wanted the context.
Yeah, yeah,
for some
no,
reason I
that's
thought
really
highlighting
important.
it, like,
So the
is that
503 was
right?
the fund.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Right, so
thank you.
503 is. fund.
Thank you for the summary that you probably did
After.
after.
Thank you very much for the summary. A lifesaver.
Ellen is looking as tired as chair of appropriation.
Yes.
Should
I'm
be
carrying
glad
around
when this
more than a
over.
ream of paper on this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we
just
killed
mark
about
it.
You
half
need your
the
own like
vote.
wagon.
It's really an exercise opportunity.
This is an old growth forest sitting here on our desk.
It's not,
Yeah.
no, those trees were bred for paper.
Trees
They
are
don't get
bond things.
What
This
is, what is
committee
the
needs
forest
to be
paper company
supported.
that plants trees?
Yeah, well,
This committee needs to
that's
be
another
supporting
conversation.
The state
our
house.
forest product industry.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Anyway.
we're not making it in Vermont.
Absolutely, every one of these are Vermont trees.
Uh-huh, I bet
Maybe
they were
Maine.
made in China.
I don't care, it's a Vermont
Just
product.
start.
I'll start talking. This is too fun. I can hang on all day. So I'll give you the context and explain what I'm.
We still
asking
do.
for.
We're at page
So
51,
now we're
right?
gonna be at bottom of page 51 and it goes on to the top of page 52. And what we're looking at here is one of the requirements for to be designated a tier 1A area, and this is speaking to the planning that community has to have had. And this is a much softened version of what used to be requirements for wildlife habitat bylaws. So now this is really just saying that there has to be planning based on significant natural communities, rare and endangered species. So this is just saying to the extent they're not already covered by state permits, basically the tier 1A community needs to have planned for them and or just excluded them from the tier 1A area. So that is much softer and does not require new bylaws per se. It's a little vague, but
Peter knows how I feel about rare ferns, so I wanna make
I
sure
love
we're
rare
fine.
ferns.
With Peter.
I'm the former Parks Commission chair, so I love rare ferns. I love rare owls. I love salamanders, you know?
I'm a huge fan myself.
Does
So-
We have to balance them.
I
have
sent
salamanders
I sent
and
the
birds.
chair some.
No ladies.
Oh, I love lady flippers.
No.
You need to come to the Eshqua
Sorry,
Rock and
not
I will
at
sell
No,
you.
that's okay, that's fine. I sent Madam Chair, proposed language to tack on a sentence to the end of this that basically just says, you can rely on the state mapping and data that already exists to plan for.
Out there.
And that-
This is it.
That's right, this already
We do not
exists.
need to duplicate efforts.
We don't wanna duplicate and we don't wanna start making municipalities pay to bring experts in to
Right,
read these
absolutely.
areas.
Right.
So if the sentence would just say the municipality can rely on the available state data and mapping. And that sentence should be in your inbox, Madam Chair.
I feel like that, I mean, this is a bigger disagreement, but I feel like that makes sense in
Yeah.
starting with the municipalities before they add a new criteria to Act 250 for forest blocks. That feels like, let the municipalities look at their maps and understand that before you,
I think that's what
Creative.
it's starting for.
yeah.
And then you build on that. When they have a lot of tools that already exist and
Right.
a lot of resources that
Mhm.
already
Right.
exist. And ANR has, as we know, done a lot of that work already.
Right,
You're
but it is
absolutely
in
right.
1A, which isn't gonna help the rural
That's,
communities with this new criteria.
that's exactly right.
Endangered species or rare species maps over
The Montpelier.
years ago.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, we've got one, probably the attack chickens that lived in the house. But
Oh,
they-
that lived here, like on the state house.
No,
Oh, we have
on
a friendly
Redfield
chicken.
Street, we had
Okay.
attack. And, but they wouldn't tell you what it was. It was on that bank between Northfield Street and National Life. But they didn't want you going looking for it, so you just knew there was something there.
There's
But
still
not
attack
what it
chickens.
was.
I would like to see this.
I don't know, but I could do with an
The
attack
chickens were
chicken
better
right
than the
now.
dead
People
deer
love
that
these
was laying in
chickens.
the driveway for a while.
Where, on the Senate floor?
I got
In there.
hold my.
Someone's now
calendar
gonna say
on
there
the
are
shit.
rare attack chickens, like in the middle of Montpelier.
Well, the roosters. Can I,
That's
yes, just
These
follow,
are the worst.
so, your comment to rely on state data, it seems like it might be applicable to, at the top of page 51, the flood hazard river corridor. Because, my understanding was we want the state to do flood hazard river corridor, just regulation because rivers go through towns. So
Oh, I see
wouldn't
that.
your,
I defer to A and R on that one.
all right, it just seems kind of well, we should talk about it, because I don't know if it makes sense to make the municipality have separate bylaws. Obviously, they should
They should
abide by the
Stay
state.
aligned with.
Right, but if they do bylaws and the state does bylaws and the
Yeah.
municipality has to change its bylaws when the state does, I mean, we just need to make it logical.
Integrated.
And we
Yeah.
need. I
Hold
mean,
on to
we're-
that.
We're talking
Yeah,
Oh,
about,
I got a note, a big
Yeah.
note.
we're talking about village centers or town centers and a half or a quarter mile around. A large number of our village centers are in the floodplain.
Mhm.
So I think that's what the Montpelier merchants are saying is. Can I put a deck out back or can't I expand?
Could
because-
we?
And, but
Yeah.
again, the developable land here is probably on Terrace Street where there's a plateau and fields. And actually,
And I'll
many
bet
years
they-
ago, there was a permit for luxury condos up in the hills, which caused great pain and then never
What?
got built.
What if, a light just went on.
Oh,
What if we specifically call out some metric of your designated area has been,
underwater.
it is a floodplain, and you need more flexibility to move another half mile out.
Yeah.
Well, this area is just the tier 1A too, this.
Yeah.
But I'm
defining
actually
tier one.
I put this under all of the mapping.
Yeah,
When they map Londonderry and they no longer have a center of town, we should specifically call out that what our
It gets
fear
an
is.
extra quarter mile, or it
Yeah.
gets an extra. I think
yeah,
that's
but
where
not
you're
Yeah.
into the floodplain,
No,
go out
quarter
of the.
mile
We will-
beyond the
Yeah, well.
Yeah, right, like, I think that's our concern, if it doesn't become reality, great,
Yeah,
but we know there are gonna be a handful of designated areas that have no more land buried even, I mean.
Buried in the
Very
same boat.
Yeah.
It's
so the downtown board,
A quarter mile and find to be 3/8.
Right.
yeah,
And you
exactly,
use
so I think
something
that's
that
what
is
she's
more
saying.
A
flexible.
variance of something,
And the temporary exceptions we're talking about.
and as of now, the
The entrance.
downtown board.
they're not
does
mapping
this,
this for the next 3 years.
uh, And so it would fit precedent with what the downtown board does with giving designations now. Now, I'm talking, understanding it's a different process, but it's not without precedent. Right now, neighborhood development areas are supposed to fall within the planning buffer, but if the core designation that that's attaching to is right next to a floodplain, or let's say it's cut off by a boundary,
Mhm.
we allow that to extend that NDA or extend
Okay.
beyond the planning buffer, because it would make sense to give an appropriate area.
Okay, so so the other issue I wanna flag is we never got any time with the designated area language, that's not, but you.
It's true, because it hadn't been finished by the time.
Right, so we have to
they
just, we
picked
might
us.
have you back to look at that whole.
Yeah. Natural Resources doesn't want us building in floodplain.
Yeah,
No, no,
we don't want it.
we don't
We don't want
either,
that either.
Right, that's a
No.
text.
so let's,
How
yeah,
do we allow building back, starting at the floodplain
Right.
designation?
yeah,
So,
if you lose X% of your
Yeah,
designated area to the floodplain mapping, you get that percent.
you get comparable space out.
Someone write that down in the.
I have.
And we can also, we have the
Yeah.
ability to reduce floodplains.
Megan,
Yeah. I hope I'm not mixing things up, but so the designation with the buffer. The
yeah.
half mile, quarter mile is in this bill is only for the interim exemptions.
That's right.
mhm,
The tier 1A and B are not going to be mapped based on the designated area
That's
plus
right.
the buffer.
mhm, right.
So
Some of those will be bigger than.
so they'll be
They-
bigger.
yeah, they
I mean,
should
I
be
think
bigger.
they should be bigger, so I don't know if you're talking about the tier 1A. I guess I'm talking.
Right, are we talking about an exempt?
Well,
If you're talking about the long-term
Yeah.
tier 1A,
Yeah.
that's gonna be mapped in a way that's supposed to be looking at where is there room to grow for the next 20 years?
Yeah.
Where are the historic patterns now?
It'll already account for this.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't,
So this would be relevant for the interim exemption
Yes.
perhaps.
This is
yeah,
just,
but not the one,
Right,
not
so
the per-
Exactly.
more
Yeah.
permanent.
they somehow they could be prioritized for like a new designated area. I'm thinking, you're right. I just,
And
where they're doing the mapping now, and even if they weren't doing the mapping, there are communities that are like John said, let us build away from the river
Right.
quickly. You know, we need more housing now. We can't put people back where they were. So can we give them
For the interim.
an interim
Correct.
exemption
that's,
that,
that's what we're
that
talking.
has to be defined, but is fast tracked through the process?
I think there's a reasonable route there, yeah. But
Okay.
Megan, that's a great point, that the
Yeah.
longer term.
Thank you for reminding me that
Just
Those good piece.
the 1A everywhere.
But the
I know.
key takeaway here is if you lose X% to a flood corridor, you get X% additionally wrapping around.
but we don't, the maps won't be done.
No, no,
you
right,
get a quarter
but then
mile,
around
you
your
get a quarter
designation.
mile
But
from
it
the edge of your floodplain.
But,
Now you get a quarter mile from your downtown. If your downtown's underwater,
mhm.
you get a quarter mile from where the water stops.
I think it's a quarter of a mile from where your village center line is.
Yeah, but your village center
not-
line is
Let's
underwater.
workshop.
Yeah.
Let's workshop this. I
Because
think
I
we're
didn't
all.
even come in and suggest that, you're already there without me. You- I
That's what we
didn't
do.
get
Okay,
here.
keep
Right,
going,
that's
Alice,
useful.
but we need
I'll
to.
keep going.
Is economic
So-
development watching us?
Another,
That's us. I mean, that's where we.
We are economic.
I don't
You're
know.
half of my community.
I
Yeah.
don't do it watching.
Well, Tom is actually sitting in transportation all by himself right now,
Okay.
so.
We're like revolving and Ellen is tired.
That's right, I know. Alright, so still sticking with tier 1A changes that we would like to see, so that was the first
For the
one.
interim exemption.
No,
This is,
Here.
this is as it gets crafted.
we're coming back to where I was at, tier 1A, permanent.
But it's good reminder.
So,
No, I needed to bring this, okay, great, tier 1A permanent.
Madam Chair just had a brilliant idea, we had to jump back, I'm on
Sorry.
board with it. Let's see, okay, here we go, I'm back.
Tier 1 permanent.
So now let's go to page 55. So now we're gonna talk a bit about who can appeal a tier 1A designation. Now, I'll just say, to my understanding, this could go either way. So let's say tier 1A is not granted, you can appeal that, or if it is, you can. But I would just want to talk a bit about at the bottom of page 55, who is an interested person and who can
yes.
appeal that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see, so it goes on to page 56 to list out different interested parties. But the very bottom of page 55, lines 19 and 20 are what's very, very concerning to us.
Mm-hmm.
Is that any single person who just owns, who has title to property in or abutting that tier 1A area, they could appeal
This is
it.
what we just.
Any
did.
single person.
Yeah,
We,
yeah.
we spent so much time on this.
And this, well, but this is even bigger than any single housing project.
Yeah.
This is a massive municipal change.
Right.
And now you're saying any single person. So this,
And
Did
this is really
VLCT
great.
weigh in on this?
I don't know that they did. Did anybody, I'm not sure, Ted talked to this though.
I can look up this written testimony.
So, all,
Anyway, I would have to imagine Ted and VLCT and municipalities would have serious concern with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And one could do it, and then another could do it, and then another could do it.
Yeah.
On different grounds. I mean, I
Yeah.
assume once a decision was reached on one
But
grant.
Then-
But you're right, they can find
I mean-
different grounds for an appeal. Yeah.
the number,
that's been one of the main problems going in the past was that a couple of people could hold up a project that the entire town had voted to pursue.
Right.
And this could be occupying property, that could be commercial too, right?
That's right. And it's just, you have title too. So,
Or occupying.
and then if you go down to page 56, D, so lines 5 through 11, set out a separate path for any 20 person. So this is comparable to what you all just
Yeah.
changed, the 10 person to 25.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is not a single project. This is a massive municipal that has gone through so much public process. any 20
Right.
person. So firstly, I think
If
That
any
first
one
one-
person can do it, why would you bother getting 20 persons?
well, these wouldn't necessarily have to be people who have title to. I think this
Oh,
is.
could just.
Could be
No,
anybody.
it does say own or occupy.
Oh,
real
yes,
property.
well, within the municipality.
Oh, within the here.
In the municipality.
You know, this is where I said to Senator Bray,
Yeah,
if you want us to largely leave tier 3 alone, tier 1A is absolutely our jurisdiction. I mean, this is,
I would agree.
Yep.
no.
You could put roads, right?
Okay, so this is
Yeah.
flag, I mean, just for our time, this is.
So
Yeah.
I think should be scrapped altogether.
Yeah.
There's no realistic world in which any single person should be able to appeal
Right.
that. And then any 20 persons, I think is a very, very low
Mhm.
threshold here. I consider.
If they've opened the door to this.
I certainly don't either. Again,
29
enforcing
doesn't matter.
Put in
the
more.
interim exemptions at 2029
Yeah.
at least.
and the reason a person would do this would be if they want the municipality to still be subject to Act 250.
That's right.
That's why they would do that.
Well, you have people who do not want change.
Oh,
Change
no,
is
I-
frightening, and therefore, any change, and you can imagine, we're all gonna look like Long Island,
Mhm.
with,
Megan's from Long Island.
I lived on Long Island,
What?
I was
Waterbury.
a resident
That's
of Long
right.
Island, in Jones Beach.
Waterbury.
But I don't know that I'd like, that kind of massive
Mhm.
development. That's not what we're talking about, but it's easy to make people afraid.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Tier 1A is so clearly
Yeah.
yeah,
defined right now.
and there's a
Yeah.
trade-off.
Yeah.
And it's a statewide trade-off. You get to build housing and jobs and commercial buildings
Right.
in 1A. In return, you can hike tier 3 and never see
Yeah.
any evidence of human
Well,
habitation. I mean,
Yeah.
or-
except you want to lean to somewhere.
yeah, I mean, that's the big trade-off that's going on.
Mhm.
I'm fine with the
Yeah.
trade-off, but we do
Yeah.
need tier 1A.
But
And then-
what needs to be an actual trade-off.
I'll highlight one.
Right.
I'm gonna skip some of the smaller stuff and just highlight one last real issue that I want to bring your attention to. This, I think, is a little bit more room for debate than the last two that I just highlighted there, but so let's go to where.
Are you gonna bring up the A&R concern?
I'll mention them.
Okay.
Already,
Did you mention?
additionally,
Yeah,
you've been talking about coffee.
and
This
they'll
is
be
the big,
included.
this is like a showstopper. because
Yes.
We
That
reached
might have
on
been
a permit
unintentional.
piece and we think maybe they didn't discuss this.
Okay, so
But
let's
you're
get
gonna
to
get
it.
to
Let's
that,
get to it.
get to your next one. Page 51,
50, at the very top,
page 50.
lines 1 through 3
We're
on
going
page
back.
50. Well, the order in which it comes in the bill isn't how my brain works.
Okay,
It's fine, it's fine. We're
Tier 1, what
So
section?
now we're talking about, so lines 1 through 3 of page 50, so we're talking about tier 1B, and this gives municipality the opportunity to opt out. It would be our preference that municipalities not have that ability to opt out. Now, I said one thing Ted Brady would like, so I'm saying something Ted Brady would.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
So that would be my preference. And the
Yeah.
thinking is there are gonna be communities that are gonna be reluctant and resistant to this growth. We're trying to spread this out evenly amongst the state.
Mhm.
If we have too many communities starting to opt out of this T1B status,
Yeah.
that's gonna be a concern.
And I actually flagged for the Natural Resources Committee that both 687 and even more in their bill, they've talked about environmental justice, but they haven't given the environmental justice folks in the state the resources they've asked for, the new meeting times they've asked for, the infrastructure to help guide an environmental justice process that doesn't say, this wealthy community says we're opting out, this community doesn't have the resources or wherewithal to opt out, and you have an environmental justice problem all over again. And I don't think either of those committees did enough to talk about environmental justice.
I don't even think, I mean, environmental justice is one lens, but it's inequitable
Yeah,
to have little, it's like one single family zoning.
right,
It's like
Yeah.
protecting all the
yeah.
value of who can live where.
Mhm.
And it's like protecting, not my backyard. It's like a huge,
Yeah.
not my backyard. So I think it's beyond
Yeah.
EJ. I think it's equity for everybody. That's what.
But yes,
Well,
I agree, whatever language we use,
That's
I
right.
have deep concerns about opt-out.
Inertia is a powerful force.
Yeah, that's right.
What is?
And so
Inertia.
Oh,
I'll also just say as far as the tier 3, while this isn't as concerning as it once had been, there were a couple changes. There was a little bit of a roller coaster ride instead of natural. This tier 3 as it is in here is a bit more prescriptive than we would prefer.
Mhm.
Actually, the version as passed by the House, which
Oh.
gave more deference to rulemaking,
Mhm.
it would have been the preferred route.
Mhm.
Again, this is more
and what
A&R
page you on?
Pete's territory, so I don't have the page number or specificity on this, I'm just,
I'm just
Make
putting
sure
my spreadsheet under the topic area.
yeah, but,
They're
Yeah,
big,
so.
so
big
you
picture.
actually support the House's version on tier 3 more.
Well,
Well, what,
I wouldn't say it was more comfortable with, the as passed by the House version
Yeah.
than what it is
I
now.
mean, you're not saying you're ready to.
Senator, you're trying to get me fired.
well, we will look at that area because again, we have this overarching concern that municipalities really be supported to be at the table on tier 3.
Yes.
What's the key, if I may ask, what's the key difference between the tier 3 between the House and the Senate? Or should we ask
Ellen?
Pete or Ellen? It's just rulemaking or is it something else?
It's the,
Pete, just identify yourself.
yeah, Pete Gill, Executive Director for the Natural Resources Board. It's the descriptors surrounding, flexibility within, the rulemaking process. So meaning there's a little more flexibility within the House version, the short answer.
Meaning that we're not gonna make a good decision in the next 3 weeks.
We need to utilize our partners in
Yeah,
determining
this is-
what the
yeah,
tier.
this hasn't even had any public process, I just don't.
But we're the beginning of the public process. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's.
And we have been hearing that people want to see it at the table.
Right.
Okay, I have some questions for you, Alex, do you have more?
We got
No, well, except
the A
that
and R.
there is
Oh, yeah.
one.
Keep us on track here.
And this is the last thing I'll bring up, and it's so far out of my wheelhouse, but I know it's a significant concern for
Yeah.
A&R, so I'm gonna flag it, and then Billy Coster can speak to it more.
Okay.
So let's go to page 29. I'm making you go backwards again. I'm
that's
sorry.
all right.
It's okay, we can do this.
Lines 17 through 21. So that strikeout is significantly concerning to A&R and MRB.
Sorry, the 17 through 20.
So that strikeout, the repeal of this deference to agency technical determinations, if Pete wants to speak to that anymore, he can. Otherwise, I'll just flag that is massively
We're changing the precedent of rebuttable presumption.
right.
I don't know if anybody else knows what that means, that needs more explanation.
I think we're gonna need more explanation.
But this is similar to what I was talking about with the
Assumption.
coordination of.
But and this was I think a later change, one of the later drafts, but would be a real concern, potential showstopper. I believe that's all I had.
And I will say it might be my fault because I wanted to go further toward dispositive. People remember this was a conversation about
Right.
dispositive permitting.
Yeah.
And I think A&R, I think Natural Resources thought, we're just going back to the status quo. I think, because this would be a big change that isn't the status quo.
Yeah, so right now we have presumptions of compliance, if you have a permit from A&R and then the technical determinations from A&R provided deference. This eliminates, this section that Alex was identified eliminates that technical determination, which I'm not sure was necessarily the intent. So I think the bottom line is you should look at both those sections holistically and figure out what you want to do with that
Okay.
area to.
Are you gonna is someone gonna recommend something to us, or do you recommend just going back to the status quo here?
I think we'll talk about that. We can try to make sure
Okay, that
that's
would be
appropriate in the memo that we'll provide you as
Okay.
the shares. Okay. That was all I had, although I'll make one.
There were other A&R things.
No, those are the two. Well,
Yeah.
just generally speaking, there's under-resourced. There are more things that they'll want to speak to in detail.
Mhm.
I can just say both the NRB and the A&R are significantly under-resourced given what's required here. Not to mention what's being required given the timeline that it
Yeah.
has.
Right.
So both of those things, properly resourcing in terms of positions, money, but then also
Yeah.
stretching it out so they can actually handle the work and.
And I will deliver the not so good news that in discussing the monies that we could allocate from a property transfer tax that has to be passed by finance, the NRB allotment came down to 1 million, 2 million. So That's
fine.
I wanna let you know now, that's what you're gonna see in our amendment. We had a lot of pressures on a very small amount of money. And I hope we can raise that up in the future. And in fact, it largely came from a downgrade in the anticipated revenue of about $1 million or $2 million. Because they're anticipating changes in the housing market that will fluctuate.
Right.
Yeah,
The second home boom with COVID may well be over.
right. They went back and looked at like 2019 and
Yeah.
2018 levels, so.
I don't think it's over.
I mean, it just went down by $1 million, but you know, that we want to find you more money.
We're dealing with small.
I actually have something that Senator Harrison flagged that if it's still in there, I think is of concern to you all. The road rule became an and.
They caught that.
They caught
It is
that.
an or.
Ooh, I can
Yeah.
unbold.
It
some.
was an and,
Okay.
but they caught it. But can I
Okay.
just go back on the A&R, just to make sure that we talk about, in the permitting process that municipalities would have,
Mhm.
how they would handle, different opinions from different A&R departments. We don't have to talk about it now, but I just think that's an important thing to talk about.
One tiny item that I'll toss at you is that there's two studies asked of my team in here, land bank study and basically an affordable housing incentive study. Both due in December. We would love to have one, either of those pushed back to the summer. You all can choose which.
So hold up, we put in the land bank study.
That's right.
And we made it a kind of like, just let us know, we don't have any
More
money
like
for
a
you.
report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did not put in the affordable housing study.
That's a different.
I don't feel like we need to study that issue. We just looked at a lot of data and a lot of the stakeholders
So
are in close communication.
Their committee needs to look at it.
I can
but
give
I think our
background.
committee's okay.
I can give the background there to some extent, and that's that I think there's concern around the diminishing role of PHPs going forward. And so what other incentives could be in place to replace that? Now, that said, it's
Money.
sounding like, yes, money, but it also sounds like PHPs will continue to actually play a pretty strong role going forward. Even though they may not necessarily be relevant in tier 1A
Right.
areas, but
I would foresee, and I tried to talk to Senator Gray about this, but if we look at tier 2, maybe we give PHPs a higher threshold in tier 2, because 1055 is strong.
Yeah.
I mean, I still believe that very strongly.
Is it 10 units or 10 buildings?
Yeah.
Because,
10
okay,
units.
so that's one of.
It could even be mobile home
because it's
repair.
still, right, so
Yeah,
it's still
which
status
as
quo.
Yeah.
opposed to 10 individual homes is a very different land use impact.
Mhm.
Yep,
So we might want to differentiate.
Yeah, and PHPs are by nature clustered or workforce housing or mixed use, and they're right
Yeah.
sized for tier 2.
right.
And I just think 1055 is creating sprawl that you're gonna want, developers are gonna develop and they're gonna get their money out of 9 single family homes rather than 25 dense units of housing.
And I think we can now say that there's broad agreement in that, just by the very nature of this whole building talking about location-based jurisdiction.
Mhm.
We've acknowledged that 1055 is just encouraging sprawl.
Mhm.
Was there any conversation about the 5-5?
Not really.
Okay.
But if you look at the way even the interim exemptions are in here, just logically, the 5 and the 5 aren't including that.
Right.
But tier 2, it still is.
It's gonna
5,
keep the 5,
so-
5.
I think it's one of the biggest conversations for teachers.
I think we should talk about that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good thing.
Agreed.
I see why it was
agree.
done in the past, and I
Yeah.
think it probably did make sense.
Yeah.
But just now, it just doesn't make sense to me.
I don't think I heard nothing compelling about why you do 5 miles and
Yeah, the
Why
only
it-
reason is
it
to
is
not
so
have
arbitrary.
development,
Right.
is to not have development.
I think it creates fraud.
There's, I don't see any other,
Yeah,
purpose to it.
yeah. So we will have that conversation.
It may have had purpose historically.
Well, I think that was the purpose, was to keep development companies from being established.
And keeping them developing single family homes in these areas.
Yes, yes. Because, so I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
Well, it's probably a good thing Ellen left to do something important. We'll try and get her back. Okay, thank you. Well,
I'll be
Ellen's
back.
coming
Great.
down. Is there
Okay.
anything anybody else wants to say about where we are? Her, yes.
Is that right?
If you could do it from there, because we're about to get our lunch council. We don't want to keep her waiting, but,
Thank you. Okay,
yeah, thanks, Ellen.
thanks for listening to me again. Appreciate it very much. You're listening to me last Friday. I left feeling very hopeful that folks were really listening to. I can defer to Ellen.
No, you can finish your thought.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
was really hopeful that folks were seeing the need to think about affordable housing and housing in rural Vermont.
mm-hmm,
Beginning of Wednesday, I was kind of hopeful that they were moving in the direction of putting off that decision. They need to work things through the final version of the bill. Disabused me of that notion. I'm really discouraged. Kind of depressed about the future of rural housing and housing in rural Vermont because tier 3 act jurisdiction is currently drafted. It's going to be devastating. You can't build homes if you don't have land built on. And tier 3 is quite clear in the legislation that within its boundaries, any home, single, solitary home, somebody starting out in life, can't build a home within tier 3 without an active insurance. I have, as I talked to the senator briefly before, I started scribbling out some options for trying to fix the bill.
mm-hmm.
Can I go through those briefly, or do you want me to?
If you could submit them in writing and we'll,
Yeah, but let me just,
Yeah.
just generally speaking, say that I don't think tier 3 is ready for prime time. I really don't.
Mm.
I think that when folks in rural towns don't understand really the impact right now, find out they're gonna be really ticked. And so it deserves a study committee, not a working group. I think it's a study committee of legislators who can hear from their constituents. And that's option 1. Option 2 is I've heard loud and clear that people thought that municipalities in the first instance would be given the crack at defining tier 3 boundaries. This bill does not do that.
mm-hmm,
I could craft some legislation that I think would do that in a responsible manner. That both protects natural resources, tells municipality, you gotta protect the natural resources.
mm-hmm.
Within the context of providing for the housing needs of your communities with some accountability mechanisms if they mess up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Please send us that, Herb. I mean, what I'll say here is they really hampered us in tier 1A. And
Yeah,
a very small group of people power over tier 3. It's just not fair.
I hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, Senator.
To me, I guess I was envisioning tier 3 as mountaintops, steep hillsides. If it's going to be taking in flat,
Forest blocks, wildlife.
yeah,
Forests, yeah.
yeah, rural communities need housing, I mean.
So what-
Scottsboro is not that rural.
One of the things you asked before was a map showing what would be
Yes.
taken out.
Yeah,
I got that.
yes,
You
thank
want to
you.
see it?
Yeah,
No,
we have it
Alan's
and we
ready to-
will.
Oh,
yeah.
you do. I
Yeah,
got it.
well, and we're having a housing conversation with Pew Charitable Trust at lunch. They have lots of thoughts on rural housing as well as manufactured housing, so if people wanna stay for that at lunch.
That's over in
Ellen,
the pavilion, so don't
we might,
stay.
no, I moved it here because I don't wanna walk over to the pavilion. So if 20 people come, then that's great.
So may I just
Yeah.
say, our hope here is that the mapping is gonna be re-anchored, beginning with first, obviously, what A&R has already done in mapping and working with our towns. But then really anchor with the town working with their RPCs. I think that really has to be a key piece to this, so
We're very open to your ideas.
Yeah.
Put them in writing and we're reading them.
I'll put something together that reflects that.
There's not enough voices for rural communities right now in the final decision. Alan.
Welcome
Hi.
Hi. So what is it you want me to do?
We could go to specific places to better understand them. Or start with the summary.
well, we could look at your summary, cause I think it's
That may be-
me, where would you suggest for us to get an overview of this massive bill? It's strikes me that the.
Do you, I mean, what I did was already read through 687 and make comments about the kinds of changes we would propose. We probably wanna better understand where things changed, but we have an hour and 45 minutes, so we should probably have a pretty targeted conversation. If people wanna spend the first half hour going quickly through the summary. And really, at some point, so after section 49, has anything changed? Designated area, I think we didn't get to look at that at all, so.
Yeah, language in the designated areas sections. After 49, so. The municipal zoning sections came from your bill, the designated areas, there was work done on that language. But other than that. The other half of the bill that I didn't draft hasn't changed at all.
Right, and that'll be a finance conversation next anyhow. Okay, so we're talking about
You mean the tax?
52 sections of the bill that, let's take a half hour to kind of go and let Ellen talk and then we'll go back into detail.
Sure, so I started the walkthrough last week.
Yes.
And did most of it, using this section by section. There were changes made in the last week. Yeah, I don't.
I think, could we talk about the big change? Oh, can I borrow somebody's charger? Why don't we talk about the big changes that were made to those 52 sections?
All
So,
the tax credits were back in here and reasons. That weren't in our bill, they're all
So,
back.
and Ellen, that, I think John is doing tax credits.
No, we do it, I just found. We did big sections, the finance is gonna.
Oh, I think half the bill is finance and appropriations, so.
Yeah.
We'll just focus on these sections
And the credits are both because.
Right.
of The tax expenditure.
right. Okay.
so I guess,
Can I ask you, I'll ask a couple questions if that helps. Or not, about things that I don't think are in here, I can't tell though.
Well,
But
Does everyone feel like they have a working knowledge now of what changed, or do you wanna go through the section by section first and ask questions?
And how did section 85 eliminate the limit for the Vermont income tax deduction for medical expenses?
That was the Wake Robin piece, we did that in here. I don't know that we have a fiscal note on it yet, this is, but that's all a finance
You can
conversation.
look at that.
Ellen
Right.
doesn't,
section 73 on is copy and pasted from S311.
Right.
That's all
Right,
has to be. allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That your committee
Mhm.
approved.
Okay, I think that's finished where you left off
Mhm.
in our walkthrough.
Well, we
I
got
like-
through the full 687 walkthrough.
Yeah.
We now, I think. What we
Change it
need to,
Yeah, I think we need to focus on the changes to the work that we
Yeah.
have jurisdiction over, because we understand that there are, while they pass the bill, there are a whole swath of questions.
I will start with, like, if we look at the sections on the on the, environmental review board. We are hearing a concern that they don't create divergent paths for a single project to either have their appeals go to the environmental review board or the environmental court. They may have to now go back and forth. It doesn't set a direction
For a
for
single
a
project.
single project. They might have to now go to environmental court and the environmental review board.
Potentially has additional duplication.
And
conflict.
Uncopy.
Yeah,
duplication, conflict, and no single funnel, no simplicity, no. Yeah, so we need to, I think, understand that was.
Is that a question?
Could you highlight where in the bill the sort of changes to who hears appeals lives?
And how that process goes.
Sure, so it's multiple sections of the bill. Yeah, so yes, this is establishing that the land use review board would hear appeals of Act 250 permit decisions from district commissions as well
I thought it
as
was gonna be called the ERV.
it is in this version, the land use review board.
They made it LURB.
Yeah.
Okay.
Blurb, yeah.
Critical change.
Well, I mean, to be fair,
Yeah.
it is not.
It's not environmental,
It's
it's
not
land use.
environmental,
Right.
the land use review.
Yes,
It is about construction and development, so.
okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that, because I thought there was another
That is
group that was doing two things.
So, so there is a change in this bill from environmental review board to the land use review board. It is setting up that they will hear appeals and,
But just from the district commission, not from municipalities.
correct. Yep, so
Mhm.
just Act 250 appeals of permits and jurisdictional opinions. Just like you heard last week, this is going back to the system that was previously in place for Act 250 for the first 35 years, where the quasi judicial board heard appeals. And it is making it a professional board with a chair and 4 full-time members, so it would be a full-time board.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, other appeals would still go to the court, which would be a municipal land use permits and an A&R permit appeals. This was the system that existed for 35 years. Currently, the court can make disparate decisions on an A&R appeal and an Act 250 appeal.
Right.
So that is 2 separate appeal processes, but those things have happened in the past, do happen now on occasion as well.
I think we'd like to work on language that essentially, I talked to Senator Bray about his interest in the New Hampshire Housing Board of Appeals, but that is a choose your own adventure, system where you are not then subject to both the Housing Board of Appeals and the court. So if we are going to give more jurisdiction to the LURB, I think we need to, I wanna draft language that says, and then all of your permits are heard in that arena, in one arena or the other.
Right.
And there's all in New Hampshire had an appeal to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Whichever way you chose.
Right.
So I'm just curious, are you in the way and maybe Pete should weigh in on this too,
Mm-hmm.
is LURB capable of also hearing the municipal appeals? I mean, it strikes me that if you're doing land use, you should do it all. And Yeah, you've got 4 full-time
I think
people, we have,
I will say there's another path forward, which is we let people study this.
Yeah.
And come back to us. I just don't think we don't know the consequences of this. So I know there's language about like a check back report, but I think the alternative that we can consider is more of a recommendations on how to proceed.
Is there money for new hires?
They,
They will not be starting this year, so they're not.
they're not in this year's
and we
budget.
get, the other two committees, I think only gave $116,000 for two attorneys for 6 months. But I think they need the money now, so that's why we gave them $1 million. So, yeah.
I'd sort of like to hear an answer to my
Mhm.
question.
I'm happy to, Pete Gill, Executive Director, thank you for that question. I guess, what I'll say is that we have overarching concerns about, the gravity of these changes that are being made and being able to implement that at the same time of adding in, the concept of appeals generally.
And the land use map in general.
Yes, I mean, there is a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
A lot of making sure that this is successful, we'll ride on all of this, and if we are also adding in, appeals that the court is doing now, that seems to complicate it.
To overcome it, I don't know if it is.
So, sorry, what did you say overcome?
I mean, as it's drafted here, having the appeals go to the LURB,
No, just
Yeah.
the Act 250 appeals, so LURB here,
right,
as opposed to the municipal, we were hoping only for a single funnel.
So,
yeah, and the court provides that function now, and what I'm saying is that, we would prefer that if appeals are added to the LURB, that would happen down the road, have some study, have some, check back in where we are in several years, once we've started to implement these other changes in terms of jurisdiction, the tiers, et cetera.
So start with
I
your current jurisdiction.
Yes,
can you show us where the study part is, or we wanna know how this would work? And come back, is there none of that? Megan, have that.
That's on Senator Bray's list of potential amendments.
Well, those are the questions.
Okay.
That's part of the question.
Number 13.
So
Wow,
That'd be
this
helpful.
list
That'd be
doesn't.
helpful. That'd be helpful.
Megan, just to follow
We're
up,
gonna rewrite
where
this
is
bill
that
on the
list?
floor.
Yeah,
Do we have that list?
no, we can have Senator Bray.
Peter's got it.
He has this magical list. Okay, we
Well-
don't wanna get, it's really helpful. I don't know, Ellen, if you feel like you can speak to this list in it, so it's like, we might have some sidebar commentary, because that's really helpful for us to
Mhm.
know. Because that's the direction that Senator Bray told me he was going. And he's being true to his word, it just isn't there yet, so.
Ellen had some.
So there is a report on moving the board to hear appeals. It is quite detailed. The Commission on Act 250 the next 50 years studied the issue.
Where is it?
It is a report that exists.
The
Okay.
report that from the commission.
Okay,
That was done comparing multiple appeals structures and models that recommended that that a professional board hear appeals. And that is why this body has passed on multiple occasions, moving the board to professional and hearing appeals. And it has been vetoed before. So this is not a new concept.
Or you veto.
Well, maybe do veto.
so
Great.
we're gonna have more conversations that look at compromise language there.
Think on that.
So, kind of two really easy
Yeah.
questions, I think, is the self-certification in the,
Yes.
Yeah,
great,
on page 15.
oh, 15, okay,
Hmm,
great. And then is the sign requirement in there too?
Yes.
Oh, good, okay. Yay. I tried to start from the beginning.
yeah. I'm looking at section 5 now, and I think my computer's charged a little bit again. Is there anything? Let's just
Can I ask Ellen about here's how it works now, the appeals, when a developer has multiple A and R permit requirements, and say the fish folks don't agree with the stormwater folks, or some two divisions of A and R don't agree with each other. I thought that the district commissions themselves decide which path to take.
I think you just asked sort of two different questions.
Okay.
In A&R's permitting internal process, that they would not be before the district commission at that point.
They would,
So like during the permitting process for stormwater,
Yeah.
the district commission is not participating in that. A&R has their own internal process.
okay. So I've seen a situation where the two A and R permits or draft permits conflicted with each other. And so who makes the decision of which one the applicant should abide by, which one wins?
I don't know.
All right, Pete, do
Okay.
you know?
I can jump in. I mean,
Please.
so if, I mean, generally the agency tries to be coordinated and they've got positions that help coordinate their comments on all of their, from all their different departments' interests. But I will say that ultimately the district commissions have to decide whether, each of the different criteria are met under
Okay.
Act 250. And so they can take, evidence on that from A&R and from others, to make those determinations, but they have to make sure that it meets before they can say, land use development is granted.
Okay, so that's the district commission to make that decision. So in the structure that we're setting up where the town would have, say, 1A. Who would the town be responsible for making that, because that's not something the town currently deals with.
The so if they're in 1A, they would be outside of Act 250, so it would not be the district commissions at that point, and it would
Right.
be the town process that would guide that. Any municipal decision making on that.
Okay, so they would make that decision.
Yep.
And that would be the case with other A and R permits that are not currently handled by towns.
To the
Okay.
extent that A&R was weighing in on those.
Well, those are
Yeah.
major permits.
And to
So-
the extent that the town reviewed through those aspects.
Oh, right, because they don't. Well, I think the A and R authority would say that.
Right, the A&R authority would still exist, but land use permits, there's a variety of criteria that the municipality has the authority to review on, and they don't necessarily all use the same.
Right. So was there conversation about this in the earlier? With the commit, like how that would mesh?
What do you mean,
Like if there's no Act 250 permitting and the permitting is only, the land use permitting is by the town. Then would the developer have to go separately to A&R? And all of the other agencies that wouldn't be covered by
So
the town?
so they still do need to obtain any permits through the agency that they would otherwise need to obtain.
Okay, so they would, if the town didn't cover it, then they would do that separately.
yeah, they still have to
Yeah.
get any permits.
Alright. Cause that will be just challenge, the thing they don't, I mean, they do have to get those permits now, but. If the district commission isn't there to. Rule on competing permits. Somebody needs to make that decision.
I mean, I don't wanna step in for A&R, but I mean, if they would need to obtain each of the permits that they would be required to for A&R.
Right.
And so, I mean, whether there's conflict in between those or not, they're, they
I understand,
have to get both of those.
but sometimes there is conflict between. So we just
I mean,
have to
I
put
think
that into
if there's been some other person who helps to make that decision, it's not written in statute that it's the district
Right,
commission or coordinator. And this is kind of part of the conversation we had with the A&R that should continue into next year. That they think they have like concierge service or something to help people through the process. but we constantly hear that there's no way to go to a higher authority in A&R
Right.
when you have a conflict, when you disagree with a permit decision, et cetera. So I think that's gonna have to be a next year conversation, but it's not like we're changing statute, as I understand it, on what district commissions do right now. They may have just informally started going to them to break a tie of some kind or.
I think
I
that
don't
just
know.
most of those permits are Act 250 permits now, so the district commission is there. But
Yeah, that could be the case. I mean, there's two things there too, right? There's potentially two different permits from A and R that are coming in place, but there could also be just an Act 250 criteria that's being that A and R is participating and commenting on that would not necessarily require an A and R permit as part of that.
alright, so yeah, that's more of a conversation, so it should just be on our list.
Right. So
Yeah, okay, big list.
I am glad I made this spreadsheet because it's my opportunity, I think, to share with the committee too, what I've been thinking about and kind of flag for Ellen, like these are probably some of the changes we'll want to discuss with Senator Bray. And I think would be considered a semi-public document at this point, but Magali is sharing with us Senator Bray's open questions for further discussion.
Ones that Peter has.
Yep.
We will just leave it at, it's circulated enough that it's
Got it.
open for us to look at, to not guess about what's still at discussion. In section 1, and I think there's a lot of agreement around this, the purpose needs to include housing. This no longer has
Construction. the purpose.
visionary language on healthy vacancy rates and housing goals. So we'll wanna
So
add.
this is the
that.
statutory purpose section for the construction of Act 250, not construction of housing or other buildings. This
But
is how-
land use includes developed areas.
Sure, so I was trying to say this is statutory interpretation language. So while you could mention specific types of development and buildings, yeah. This is for what should guide statutory interpretation of Act 250 broadly. So it doesn't need to be specific to individual types of development.
Well, it has the conservation vision and goals for the state established in the 30 by 30 and 50 by 50. And we have housing goals.
Yeah.
So I think we want to articulate that in the bill that's being called the housing bill. So does it do it elsewhere in another section?
So this bill is about land use broadly, and
Mhm.
this is statutory language for Act 250 alone.
Act 250 includes compact village settlement.
Sure.
So
But
if
this
we
is,
need to
I'm
fit it
saying
into Act
that this
250
is
language.
statutory purpose section
Yeah,
for the statute. It wasn't for the bill overall,
Got
just for the Act 250 section.
so we still want to change it.
it. So
Yeah.
I think, well, or
Uh-huh.
we need to find out where it's appropriate to have purpose language that includes all three things this bill is doing. So maybe now that the bill includes so much, we have, before we get to Act 250, we have a purpose section which addresses all the pieces of the bill.
Sure, and
Might that be a consideration?
sure, and as it came over from the House, it had a session law provision that was broader than just Act 250. And so the Senate Natural struck that language and just left the language that came over for the House for the statutory
Right.
interpretation.
I will just say out loud, and I don't want to argue with anybody, that Act 250 was supposed to figure out where we develop and where we do not develop. And it's not just a conservation statute. It's about where growth should take place and where you have compact settlement. So even if we have to figure it out out of whole cloth, I'm gonna wanna put something in there.
Yeah, and I can understand their feeling about not wanting to change it for the Act 250 statutes, I get that. But I also get where we are right now with this bill and how big this umbrella is right now, and I think it needs a
Right.
purpose that pulls it all together, quite honestly.
That's where we are. So
Just the capability and development plan was never done.
So the capability and development plan as a plan or map is not done, but there is a capability and development plan that exists. It was a set of 19 findings that were made by the legislature.
Okay, so it's still relevant.
it's still relevant. It has been under discussion over the last few years if it needs to be updated. So that is a land use planning document that is much broader than environmental conservation and talks about all kinds of development. And also cited in there are the land use planning goals of chapter 117.
Right, yeah, and that's where I think going back to 687, I want us, there a purpose section, but also they had a goals section. That was where we discussed the climate council recommendations and more specific healthy vacancy goals for housing. So I think I want to look back at 687 and have a longer purpose and goals section. Some of it might be session long, but I think it's important. That I do see in this list of contemplations, environmental justice being considered as something we need to talk about more. I will just say to everyone, I forwarded Carla Raimundi, our environmental justice director and A&R's requests for more support to do her work so she can support environmental justice considerations in this bill, and that hasn't gone anywhere. So I'm glad to see it on Senator Bray's list of things we need to talk about more.
So the acronyms I need to be updated on.
Which acronyms? Oh, the ones in,
On Bryce's list.
Okay, well,
AOSP, I just need a reminder.
That's your own firm.
Thank you, yes, I should know that. Pete knows I should know that.
so we're just gonna everyone should refer to that, but can't ask Ellen to speak to Senator Bray's list of thoughts.
So I see EJ here down
Yes.
at 14.
And if someone sees something on there that we're discussing, let me know. There are areas that get more into the municipal piece. So I have not heard about those yet from Senator Bray, so that's something we'll have to talk to him about what he thinks. I think we've talked enough about the check back for the switching of appeals, having a study and recommendations first. We are going to want to look back at our 2029 timeline, especially with how many new appeals to the map they have put in. So that's going to be a conversation.
Yeah,
I have already said that we have a proposal coming for how to spend the property transfer tax that needs to be approved in Senate Finance. And we can have that discussion in Finance. They left the position for an environmental court position, recognizing that this isn't going to change overnight. The appeals of the municipal map, maybe we should look again at that section about who can appeal. Because that's a big one. Yeah.
Madam Chair, before we get to the appeals of municipal
Uh-huh.
maps, I would just like to clarify. Just particularly given Herb's questions.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit out of order, so
Okay,
does
well,
the
the mapping
contemplation
generally.
of mapping come before the appeals of the maps?
Yeah, because the appeals of the maps should come after the maps have actually been created.
No, I'm sorry, I meant in the language. Where do we start talking about defining? Oh, here it is. So you're right, page 44. Is that where tier 3? Is that where all the tiers are defined?
Probably. Yes.
Gosh, where is the summary?
So
Section
page
26.
Yeah, I'm looking at page 45, 46. Talks about the stakeholder group that they'll pull together for tier 3 rulemaking. There's no appeal. I mean, this is where I think just fair is fair. There's no appeal of tier 3. There's significant appeal capabilities for tier 1A. I'd rather just get rid of both of the appeals processes. So if people wanna look at this tier 3 language and ask Ellen questions, we're gonna get some recommendations for how people think it could be clearer that municipalities get a say.
I thought, my understanding is that we were giving the RPCs, working with their municipalities, the beginning crack. Obviously, they have to take into consideration all that is already mapped and set and thought out through A&R. But the towns, a couple partnered with the RPCs, would take the initial crack at making their choices in doing an initial map. Of all the tiers, of all the tiers.
Exactly.
And that the only way we were ever gonna get town buy-in on this was town investment in the mapping, and that then the mapping would be approved by, I guess, VLURB. The mapping would be approved by VLURB. And then it might be able to be appealed, but the mapping has to be done first with town buy-in, all tiers. And I can absolutely see towns weighing the values identified somewhere for tier 3, but that they have to.
I just remembered bringing them to.
Oh my god,
Yeah,
I was about to remind you.
Yes, and you did.
She's
remind
reminding
me,
you right
And they, Ramrods were waiting for me this
Okay,
morning, so I
okay.
said, I'll be right back.
Yeah, word.
So anyway, I think that's something we have to discuss, because to me, it's a chicken and an egg here. We have a very, I thought we had an understanding that the mapping would be all tiers, and that it would then, whatever, then it would be approved or not.
I wonder if one of the ways we try to achieve this, I mean, they do have a stakeholder group and a supposed public process named.
Where are you on page?
I'm on
40?
page 46 and 47. But I have always wanted a definition of tier 3 to come back to us. I mean, it goes till 2026, so, right, and Megan?
And I think that's part of why this isn't necessarily starting with the towns, it's because there isn't a definition of what tier 3 is.
Right,
And that was part
right.
of the outcome of the study group, was
Yeah.
saying there isn't enough known here about what should be,
Mm-hmm,
what are the natural, the
right,
critical natural resources of statewide importance, because it shouldn't be all of these things that are gonna lead to the bright red map. And
Right.
so the process is supposed to be
yeah.
defining what are those critical natural resources of statewide
Right.
importance.
This goes back to LCAR in 2026, and LCAR is like 7.
We're never gonna
You
get
know.
the mapping done in 26 if we have to wait for another group to come up with a tier 3 definition.
So maybe we look at C on page 46 and turn that into they report back to the legislature on the proposed definition of tier 3. I know I'm looking at Megan, like she could comment, but I mean, LCAR's just not enough.
Right, well, are you on page 46?
46, line 17.
Yeah, so the board shall file a final proposed rule with the Secretary of State and the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules on or before 26. These maps are due to be done in December of 26. If we have to wait for a tier 3 definition beyond this January, we're screwed. We're never gonna get the mapping done by 26, and towns are never gonna get green lighted on anything.
So we're recommending bring it back to us in 2025.
I think we need a definition of tier 3 by January 25 for us to even keep alive the idea that we're ever gonna get this mapping done in a timely fashion. And it's making the interim exemptions look definitely till 29, that we have to have those exemptions until 29, because this process is gonna be extended through this need to do a thoughtful definition of tier 3. Which I agree needs to be done. I just assumed that had been done.
Do people generally agree with, I mean, I would say if they can't do all of this by 2025, I would understand. And we could push it out a year. But
A definition
The
of tier
definition,
three?
I
That
don't
is
think
not
their
that
definition
difficult.
would be
Supposed to
that
have a
hard.
public process, so all I'm saying is
Yeah.
if they come back and say, we need more time, I'm still okay with that. It is a reference to how long this process will actually need to take. So I think he can say
Let's
to the
try.
legislature in 2025.
Let's try getting a tier three definition
Right.
by January 25. I'm sorry, I just don't think it's that hard. I'm insane, but
If
it
they
just-
do a good job with the public process, it's
Yeah.
hard.
well,
They don't,
they have,
but
X-
you know,
they have a
yeah.
ton of months, 6 months they have
Right.
to do a definition of tier three.
Right.
It cannot be that difficult, Pete.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I think the board is seated at 25, so if you want their expertise and input in it, we wanna do that rulemaking
The
or
sequencing.
legislative, however you wanna
yeah.
have that proposed, you wanna have their input.
So that means a draft, like you want a draft in 2025 or you wanna push it out to 2025?
You'd wanna push it out, I mean, so certainly generally our position in
Yeah.
terms of timeline is to extend where possible because we wanna be able to get this right, we wanna, and we wanna have the time and space to be able to do that. And have the input of the professional board as part of that.
We have not needed the professional board for the rest of the tiers. I do not think we already have your professional
We
expertise.
might need the rest of the board for the tiers because they're not in.
Okay, so if you're gonna
Rulemaking
do, if you're
Rulemaking
gonna
or
do that,
implementation.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful to have the board as part of that.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
I could get on board with then the final approval of what the definition is of all the tiers. But then, because we've already taken stabs at defining tier 1A and B and 2. I do not think it's fair to just have one hanging out there. They all should then have that professional review.
So I'll say, as we understand the provisions in this bill more that we haven't got a lot of time with, we can then, on our own time or whatever other time we can find, refer back to the sequencing spreadsheet. Ellen, are you gonna, has that changed?
I don't know.
You
You don't know yet? Okay. Next week, we can talk about timeline. With some sense of what the new timeline looks like. We will have comments, but it's hard to look at in here. We just need to understand the concepts. Senator Harrison.
I think defining tier 3 isn't that hard. It's basically, well, I know, but mapping tier 3, that's what's gonna be the hard part.
Well, that's when the definitions are gonna run into.
But the definitions are never going to be as exact. You're not just gonna be able to point to something and it's gonna be obvious.
Right.
It's gonna be the interpretation of the definition. So the
Yeah.
actual mapping of the tier 3, that's what's gonna be
But I really
hard.
do take Peter's point, like we'd be handing them this baked idea of what they're supposed to adjudicate. And then putting them in charge of the appeals, when they would have no opportunity to weigh in on time.
Another reason to not do appeals.
Or another reason to have
Yeah.
them look at all and finalize all the tier definitions and
Mhm.
wait for all the tier definitions until you cast your expert eyes on.
This is what we said in our bill anyway.
And if I may,
So I would suggest that we consider and go there.
I will say too, I mean, that was the intent under the consensus report was to have these come together as a
Right.
package at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding us of that.
But I think once the definition is done, I'm sure it will be lovely. But then I really do think the municipalities ought to have first crack at, and I had thought that municipalities would have tier 1A areas and possibly tier 1B areas in the same municipality. I don't think that's controversial, but it seems like this is written as if they're only one or the other.
No.
Oh, good, okay, then,
You could have a town that has a 1A center and a possibly 1B set area.
it didn't
and
look like that to me, so I read it too fast, but, so, and then tier 2 is gonna be everything else, so I think you really need tier 3 to have tier 2. And it's
I know.
important that the municipalities
Yeah.
really do have first crack at that, because they know their communities better than others. With the regional commissions. which is gonna take a while. So we definitely need to
So,
go to
yeah.
2029 and
Her-
find a way to craft it.
I have written all of this down. Oops.
Okay.
And if you saw me smile at my phone, Mirazetta sing along at the library.
Oh.
She screamed until she got to sit in the middle.
I
And
just have a nagging question as I look at all of this complexity associated with it. Is this gonna be better?
Mm.
It's gotta be better,
eventually,
that's the whole point of it.
because it would be local focused, as long as it's local focused.
So say I've got my doubts.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's local focus, but local,
Well,
I think we need ownership, we need everyone to own
Yeah.
what we want our towns to be. I think that is what's important.
well, and it's long-term planning.
And it's great.
We haven't done a
And so many of our towns have done great planning. We have these terrific planning commissions. They've done great work. It's building on all that work and it's kind of marrying all the thoughtful work we've done on what we want Vermont to be. 100 years.
I think we should keep asking this question.
Yeah.
Especially as it relates to tier one, because that is our jurisdiction. And I don't know that the flexibility that was contemplated in the stakeholder group discussions exists now. And how the definitions work is really critical.
Is this going to increase housing stock and rate?
Right, is
That's
my
a fundamental question.
fundamental. My next, are we ready? I think we are here, everybody. I'm gonna. Either, my first goal would be to have Senator Bray come in and talk with us. I have to talk to others about that, and otherwise I'm writing everything down and I get whatever I'm saying.
Okay.
Are there any places where there's a stated appeal all the way to the Supreme Court
On what?
on the tiers?
Yes, so. The tier 1A area status can be appealed.
Is that page 56?
Yes, page 55, page 56.
Yeah,
The board will be deciding on tier 1A applications from a municipality, so the only appeal from there is to the Supreme Court.
you know. When,
Can you say that again?
yeah, it's, so if you're looking at page 55, line 14. And then Alec.
Yeah, so municipalities will apply for tier 1A area status. The only appeal from that decision, they'll apply for that status to the board. And the only appeal from that decision will be to the Supreme Court.
But it only calls out one tier.
Correct, tier 1A.
So they could do tier 1B.
There is no appeal of tier 1B.
Interesting.
I mean, one of the things that's come up from Ledge Council, I can't remember who said this, but it was a question of whether you can limit appeals to the Supreme Court at all.
I'm not sure.
But I don't like the idea of specifically calling out one tier that could be appealed to the Supreme Court and no others.
Appeals should be,
We should leave it silent and let the Constitution guide,
yes,
but just saying tier 1A can be appealed is a no.
well, all tiers should be able to be appealed, particularly the mapping section. However, I do feel that once we are set on the mapping, that's it.
Yeah,
I mean, there should be a time period where there's weigh-in
right.
and you hopefully wouldn't have to go through an appeals, but just a weigh-in period on the map and comment period.
Mhm.
Then set those maps. Maybe there's an appeal period, but once those maps are set, that's what we're using as our guidance and our ability to greenlight and then move this process along at a speed people are hopefully hungry for.
So I've noted that. I have an overall concern about jurisdictional opinions. Can you tell me where jurisdictional opinions continue to show up in this bill?
Jurisdictional opinions are, I think, only in section, it's in 6007, which is currently section 11, so jurisdictional opinions.
Page like,
So I don't know what page it is. I guess it's probably page 21 into 22.
Yep,
So
starts on 20.
So there's
Yeah.
no change being made to the overall jurisdictional opinion process, other than appeals of jurisdictional opinions are going to the board under this, as opposed to the court.
And is that all jurisdictional opinions, the ones in the interim as well as others?
This doesn't take effect until the rest of the appeals go to the court. Move from the court, so that's October 1, 2026.
So right now, if they are seeking an interim exemption.
Mhm.
Do they, if they have the stated number of units, do they need a JO?
Yes.
Can we change that?
So that was a statutory provision that was in S100 last year.
And it have,
So so that is a provision that you could do something to, but the general ability to seek a jurisdictional opinion. It's a,
so if we add to our exemption section. Projects that fit within these exemptions do not need a jurisdictional opinion, is
the
that how we take care of that?
interims.
so that is in, section 30, that's in section 30.
Okay. The jurisdictional opinions removed, or? I think you can speak out loud. I don't wanna-
That's on page 48.
Page 48. Yeah, okay, so I see. In order to qualify, they have to request a jurisdictional opinion on or before 2027, which is also when these exemptions expire.
Right. I think we should change this language. My understanding of the purpose of the jurisdictional opinion was to document that they had started the project during the exempt time period.
Yeah.
And I, at that point, didn't know that jurisdictional opinions were appealable.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a way to document that they had started the project. There may be another way to document that they started the project. But the purpose that I understood of the exemptions was, yes, to get housing built, but also to show the impact of not being under Act 250.
Right,
And jurisdictional opinion is part of Act 250 and has more
Right.
teeth and bite than I realized.
yes. This is a live and learn, at least for me, that I thought this was a very benign and friendly way to
Yeah,
guide the process, and it's been yet another place of significant delay.
so we could just have them provided notice.
Megan.
I will note Kathy Byer, I believe, has said that for her to get financing,
Yeah,
they really require her to have a jurisdictional opinion that she is in fact exempt, so that they know she doesn't need a permit.
So everyone, so we need to fix the JO.
Can it be, can you
Optional?
have
It can be optional.
JO that's
Yeah.
not appealable? Call it a JD, jurisdictional decision, not
Yeah,
an
really.
opinion.
That's an interesting point. Thoughts?
In terms of the tracking piece, I mean, we're happy to track that in some other way, if that's.
Do you see just as many project developers wanna appeal a JO? Or it's usually those bringing,
I mean, so JO appeals, what was 7 or 8 or something like that this last year, just out of 270, around 250, somewhere in that range, just to give you that context. I don't know if I can break those down right now in terms of how that,
can we work
Yeah.
on language here that speeds up the process, makes it like more, I think we all know what we're trying to get at, which is the JO shouldn't take until 2027. You know, this needs to be pretty cursory and generally not appealable if it meets very clear criteria that we have. I mean, I think one of the issues is the last year's criteria for exemptions is not clear. We have our biggest PHP stuck. Having a
Yes.
JO right now.
You mean the
Whenever there is
Yeah.
a new legislation that comes out, it takes some time to get that formulated in the, you know, in terms of implementing it and making sure that the guidance is clear, et cetera, on those things. So,
But it's taking till now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there are developments that have not been pursued because of having to get a JO. And my understanding is that a JO is optional, that you can get it, you can call the district commission on anything. Like
If
any
anyone can
proposed.
obtain a JO on a project, they don't need to be the developer.
Yeah.
It can be literally anyone except for the district coordinator, cannot ask for a JO.
Yeah, so Kathy Byer can get as many as she wants.
So we don't have to
If-
say they
if
shall
we don't
request it.
require it.
They
Exactly.
can request it, right?
So
That's what,
I think the idea though is if Kathy feels like she has to have one. And then,
Then the process.
not even feels, like
Yeah.
she has to have one, she can get one, but then
Mhm.
somebody can appeal that and you have a project.
Right.
That should be exempt, caught in an appeal process.
So can we say
Possibly one
JO is
person.
optional and not appealable?
that's a huge change.
Yeah,
That is a big
And
change.
under this section, these are the specific to the exemptions.
we don't have to say anything about JOs. They're still optional. What we
Well,
did
we
say
did,
is,
like, we had this language last year that you shall get. it.
right, so we have to change that part, but
Yeah.
we could just leave JOs out of the.
But okay, so Kathy Byers doing our biggest affordable housing projects in the state, and she's getting appealed. Her JOs are getting appealed.
Right, so that's that's a different problem, so yeah. I
So
don't
we
know
would-
if there would be some other certification, maybe you guys can,
Well, she's
Let's-
exempt under this until 27.
but the
or
bank
29.
wants it.
But the bank needs certification
Right.
that they're not gonna loan her the money and then it's.
And they can't give it to her if they've appealed her
Right.
JO.
So she can get, she can get a JO, but if she is blanket exempt, then it shouldn't be appealable.
Yeah.
Because the law says she is.
If we're clear on our exemptions, there's no reason, that is just a tool to slow down the project.
I think there are reasons for JOs being appealed.
Under
Under
this
what-
exact.
No, not under that.
That's what I'm saying, no, this
Yeah,
is, we would
Oh,
be
yeah.
specific to this section.
Yeah.
We're not gonna touch other JOs, that's not our jurisdiction,
So
yeah.
I actually have a question. That's okay.
Mhm.
So when I look at section 30, which is on page 48, you know, it seems like this applies to section 29 only. In other words, not the 75 that the exemptions that are in place, but rather to priority housing projects. Just, I don't know, I mean, I'm trying to understand that.
I think that's fair,
And why are you saying that? Is it?
because it only refers to ten BSA
This
601.
is actually section 20.
But actually, ten BSA 601, yeah,
So if, I guess my
Well-
question is, would a JO apply to a 75 or 50 unit exemption that's in other parts of the bill? Would it be required?
say that again, a JO would not be required.
For 75 or 50 unit exemption.
So now we're gonna check with
through an A, through an
PHPs. Yeah, okay,
That's a valid question.
B. It would only
Yeah.
apply to priority housing projects.
right. I don't think they meant to do that, hence we need bigger exemptions.
Thank you.
What do you
Thank you.
I can add that priority projects do not need a JO under from Act 47, but they do typically request one.
Right, they're the ones who have to follow the most rules. Okay, so we're gonna work on that section and if only I could let it go because it only applies to one piece, but actually that would make good some sense.
Yeah.
It's just applying to the projects that they say they want the most of. Okay. Oh, that's me. Okay, still a lot. The next question I have is if this keeps the $295 fee for appeals, and if you think that's sufficient.
It does have that, yes.
What page is that?
It's in section 12.
Okay. Any regional planning commission, so the RP. Okay, so the,
So that's on page 22.
so are these the only Act 250 fees that exist?
No.
Okay,
But so for those appeal review, your
Mhm.
question being whether that's sufficient, I'll take sufficient to mean covering the cost of doing the appeal, no.
what is, I mean, is there somewhere in between covering those? I mean, because this is for a jurisdiction opinion. Filing, right now what this says is the filings, they're filing an appeal of a JO. They're filing an application for tier 1A. They're an RPC filing a regional plan of future land use map. I imagine none of those are covered by $295. But do you have recommendations you wanna make on these sections?
We don't at the moment,
Okay.
but for the invitation.
Yeah.
Is this a new fee or a new amount?
Well, we had put in,
This is a new fee because this is a new task that they're doing. And this is currently what it costs for court filing fees.
Oh.
so it's not covering their time, it's just covering court filing costs.
Yeah.
So we're covering the courts took us, but not yours.
Well, no, so this is, no, so it doesn't, so this is what currently the court charges
Right,
for filing.
I get that.
And so I don't think it covers the court's costs, but now that these appeals are moving to the board, the House decided to just use the same filing fees that the court uses.
Didn't we also put in, like, seems like a long time ago, but and my brain needs to be reminded, but didn't we also put in a fee at a certain point for an appeal that was like above and beyond the number of appeals that were necessary from one person? Didn't we put in
No.
no, we didn't, because we decided that was unconstitutional.
Depending on how you structure it, yeah,
We did discuss it though.
an appeal bond.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
discussed, you did not
Yes.
discuss like
Right.
a specific fee.
Right. Yeah, the consequence.
I don't wanna say I know what the right answer is, so if you can,
So we great
Okay.
to hear that now about all of you.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can send it to finance.
exactly, you have time.
We're gonna do it anyways. But if you come up with a better number,
Thank you.
that will be helpful.
Obviously, we've talked a lot about transition and timeline, and how to make that realistic.
Be great to get a chart on.
We will get a chart on the timeline, we have one, it's just now, I think a little bit outdated, but Ellen's working for next week. I do want it, we need to take, I think in the context of all of this, we need to take a look at the new criterion that was also added to Act 250, does that still exist in the bill?
Yes,
What page is that?
that is sections 19 through 22. So that starts on page 30.
Oh, and the road rule.
It's like page 35.
Oh, no, they did 800 and 2,000 for thing, I got confused, we have 1,000 and 2,000, so. But I still wanna note that I've noted that, so.
So sorry, you're
But
wrong page.
they got the or, yes, sorry,
Got the
go
or.
back, Jeff.
You have the distance, right?
Page 36.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, I know you're 36, okay. So we have on page 35, the definition of habitat connectors, forest walks and habitat. Did this come out of a study?
This language has been, also I think passed by the spot.
Oh, yeah.
This,
Okay,
this
was
language has
Pizza.
been, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been worked on since before I worked here.
Yeah.
So this is a new criterion for forest blocks and habitat connectors, for avoiding the undue adverse impact on either of those things.
I guess I'm grateful that administration hasn't flagged this as a major area of concern. I'm struggling with why we need this and the tier 3 mapping. I think there's so much overlap in what they're talking about. Katie, do you have a comment on this? I don't want to put you on the spot, but there's a lot about forest flex and habitat connectors in the new tier 3 as well.
Katie Gallagher, One Natural Resources Council. I would recommend certainly talking to Jamie Fidel, our Forest and Wildlife Program Manager, on this for more details. My understanding at a very high level is that I think that we imagine the tier 3 areas to be much more limited than what this criteria would cover.
Okay.
So now,
I don't know, everyone's imagining the same thing. I think that's acceptable.
I think
Yeah.
I was with Katie imagining tier 3 much more limited,
Right.
so that's.
So this is a criterion and it's not a jurisdictional trigger. So like all the other criteria, it only applies to a project if it has those aspects on the site. So if a project is not within a forest block or habitat connector, the applicant would not need to do anything about it.
Right. I just think
Forest
to me,
fire.
this is, I support this. And it says to me, let's do more on tier 3 after this goes into effect. Because this is big and this is important and this is what you all want. And no one's opposing this. People are just really scared about how all of these get layered. And tier 3 doesn't need to happen until we see what it does.
So forest blocks are not mentioned as part of tier 3.
But like natural areas are
Really?
significant areas, significant natural communities or something.
I think that's
different
why we
than a
need,
forest block. And then
Okay.
it only mentions habitat connectors of statewide significance. That is a subset of habitat connectors.
So I'm just speaking to where I am, and I love to talk to the NRC about this, but this feels like the holy grail. And tier 3 feels like the ball of yarn, and like, let's preserve this.
some people
And
here
we're
were
not-
killed from all of you. I wouldn't go dismiss.
But she makes it into a beautiful scarf, which tier 3 is not yet.
It's productive.
Exactly, so we don't treat it like it's a nothing.
And I've wildlife corridors. I've been told at one point we had a deer highway coming down the hill through my neighborhood to the apple orchards. The deer have now moved, I think up what probably is a corridor out
To
towards
detour.
Berlin Pond, it's the
Yeah,
same
it is one
ridge.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we have them mapped.
Yes.
But deer like water will find their way to where
Well,
they wanna
we
go.
lost a big development at National Life because we discovered a deer yard. The deer, there is no bark on any tree and the pond, the beaver pond is great. And the deer have moved on, they've moved on into my yard and now they've moved somewhere else. But they travel and we should make sure that when we're doing habitat, that we take off that old deer yard that's been deserted, that we didn't know was there until we went to develop it. You know, they migrate with a food source. Once you eat all the bark off the tree,
Mhm.
you move on for the winter. And I'm assuming that Fish and Wildlife track that and map it. So that we, you know,
They are.
when you're gonna
Yeah.
do something
Yeah.
there, you know. Before you get to the final stage and somebody says, there's a deer
There's a bear
yard
scratch.
back here,
Yeah.
which is what happened.
I think, yeah, we like. A non-environmental committee is looking at this for the first time, so I don't have an answer for you.
I
Yeah, it's
I can
probably
I
in our
have a
atlas,
feeling
yeah,
that it
Right,
really,
I want some.
that
Do
it
anybody wanna, does anybody wanna comment on this one? Or
I mean, deer yards are mapped.
deer yards are mapped.
Deer yards are next.
Do they ever
I
change?
don't know if they change, I mean, I'm assuming they change, you wanna get somebody from A&R to discuss
Okay.
that, that's.
because they do,
Okay.
And we can talk about the A&R atlas in general.
unless you
too,
happen
which
to
would
be
good.
up on that hill. And those deer are very permanent
Okay,
and eating everything and
deer are
every
just
neighborhood
only-
around it.
Deer are only just one group. of
right.
Natural partners in life here.
I don't wanna put the NRC on the spot, I'm just saying out loud that if we can find our way to this as something we've tried to support as part of the square bargain, but we give more deference on tier 3 to a public process. And, you know, if you all could just if you could take back to your team, you know, could they support that? Because you're hearing from the same rural folks we are, that they're just really afraid of what tier 3 could mean. And this seems much more defined in terms of, you know, scientific basis for it.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think from our perspective, that's why we've supported a longer process for the tier 3 to go back and go through both the public process, but also we've heard from A&R that they're not comfortable using their existing maps
Right,
for
right.
these purposes. And so
Yeah. For criteria, for this new criteria, yes.
Yards move.
for jurisdictional purposes.
But there are lots.
I don't wanna speak on their behalf.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah, but you're saying, get a definition of this, and that's where Jamie could speak to the ecological and scientific basis for that, et cetera. And maybe we can meet there and look at tier 3 as just this kind of thing that people are scared will happen to them and extend the process and timeline.
We would be happy to talk.
Great.
So where are we in terms of asking for a sign off on all the definitions, tier 1, A, B, 2, and 3?
I've written it down.
Good, okay, so we're still there.
Yeah,
Because I'm unhappy just calling out tier 3 as something that still needs. I mean, I think they need to be looked at in a
Yeah.
totality and signed off on
right.
as a totality.
I think it's really salient for me to hear, like, we're asking to professionalize the board.
Yes,
Their first task is to hear appeals of these maps. They have no existence or input necessarily before these map definitions are finalized. That's the problem with sequencing.
yes, no, we have to have the definitions first, then we
Right.
have to go do the mapping, and then they have to come back to you either for final
Right.
approval, for,
But they originally, they were supposed to issue guidance on the maps. And now they're like hearing it at the end. When it's over and
Well, the
people are
guide-
angry.
the guidance. I mean, in some ways, we have to empower the RPCs with the guidance because they're the ones working closely with the towns.
Mhm.
So I think it's appropriate for the RPCs to have the guidance so that they said each time, okay, this is what we're looking for, this is, you know, this is the rules of the mapping process, this is what we need. This is what we need to do, this is the time frame we need to do it in. These are the definitions, but we won't have the definitions until you do that. But I think we cannot call out any one definition, they have to play together.
Mhm.
Well, if we do everything but 3, what's left is 3.
Well, I think.
Well, I don't like the tier 2 definition. It's just an
Yeah,
issue I have.
we need to,
I-
we need to.
They need to be
figure that
done in concert
Right.
and
They need to make sense with each other. Yeah.
Well,
I've heard that. I've read that.
And
yeah.
there will be
Yeah.
some trade-offs
Yeah.
between 2 and 3.
I think just for context, maybe that part of the thinking is separating them was wanting to move forward the tier 1s
Yeah.
more quickly
Right,
in order to accommodate that housing growth.
right.
But we can and can't, we have interim measures to
Right.
cover that.
Right.
And quite honestly, if we're gonna wait for a professionalized board, let's
Yeah.
get it professionalized, then give them this immediate task of finalizing the definitions.
Before those tiers can be appealed all the way to Supreme Court.
Oh, Pete likes that.
Yes, I
Yeah.
professionalized board should be part of that process. in
Right.
terms of Determining what those definitions.
It just
are,
makes
so
common
that the
sense to me
sequence
right
can
now.
continue.
And then,
Yeah,
so good, so that means we have better buy-in on the interim
Mhm.
measures and we'll do interim until we can professionalize, define, deploy. That's the RPCs in the towns, and then comment period, and then finalize, whatever.
okay.
Are you okay with that one?
Yeah, I am.
I think Randy is.
I have an underlying
Randy, okay
question.
with that?
Mhm. But, okay. You have, maybe you have.
Well,
I'm still not
yeah.
convinced.
Yeah, there's
We're
just
doing
too many
better, but-
conversations.
What we're doing better or what we're broadly, I mean,
what we're proposing.
That's sort of the time frame. I think that that's a good time frame of how things have to happen.
I have a different thing on page 36 while we're on page 36.
Okay.
if that's, if you don't mind. Different topic. And I don't know how much, but I.
Keep asking that question, Randy. Go ahead and say, keep asking that question.
So, it's existing language lines 15 through 17. And these are the things that the board,
36.
on page 36. It's the language above the forest blocks.
Mhm.
And this is one of the things that the board can, reject a proposal for, and it's a reasonably acceptable alternative site is owned or controlled by the applicant, which would allow the development or subdivision to fulfill its intended purpose. I've had, ever since I saw that, I just think it's very unfair. Because we're supposed to be looking at jurisdictional, like, is the proposal right for this property? If it's not right for this property, you say no. If it is right, you say yes. It shouldn't matter the real estate holdings of that individual, because the person can also buy property somewhere else if it needs to be somewhere else. And perhaps this is not ever used,
I was gonna say, do you pull this out?
but I just think it's awful language.
This is existing law.
Yeah, no, Wendy caught it as.
Do you,
So-
do you feel some way about it?
Is it valuable?
Do you ever use it?
And if you do use it, I wish you did.
Unless you can give a great example.
Yeah.
You kind of made it difficult for him.
I know, well, it's only my. Or Ellen.
So I'll just say this is a very specific criteria that's part of addressing necessary wildlife and endangered species.
Yeah.
And so the question is,
Hmm.
if there's an endangered species on this property where you're trying to bulldoze, but you own a site nearby where there isn't.
Then that's, yes.
We remember this debate in Ways and Means that Jim Condit was like, I don't care about the purple polka dot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
Bringing back.
we do have a lot, endangered species
Wait.
taking is like.
Yeah,
the North
no, but you just say no, whether or not they
No,
have
that-
an exception.
Okay.
You
content
should
of
just
that.
say no.
Yeah,
It's not taking away a tool.
I think it's taking away a tool that, in Ellen's example, I think it's taking away a tool that might be useful.
Yeah, I think
Doesn't
you
sound
can
like it
keep
is.
like talking.
All right.
Like
I'd like to
I
know
hate to always say that, but you know, like I don't
No,
know that we
that's
can
okay.
solve it right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
but.
I just wanted to flag it since we're on that page.
Yeah, I remember how long we talked about
Okay.
endangered species taking and it is a road to
I'm still
It's
trying
where
to
you
understand
don't wanna go.
exactly what this means.
the endangered
Yeah,
species
yeah, no,
taking.
Number 3,
Romanet 3.
yeah, and an alternate site which would allow the development to fulfill its intended purpose. Now, I still don't know what that means.
Ask our pro here, or two pros.
As I just said, if the person seeking to build something has an alternative site that would still be able to allow. It's asking whether if you're seeking to build right in a necessary wildlife habitat or where an endangered species lives, but the parcel itself is significantly larger and there's space, or there's another site that the same person owns where they could do the construction of whatever their business or commercial purpose is, but they have chosen the place where something would, die.
Mhm.
Can they move the project?
Why don't they just apply for the alternate site? I'm just trying to
Right.
understand.
It actually
the purpose of
saves the
this
staff. I think it could save the staff.
So this is sort of it is a stepped approach of evaluating if the developer has essentially gone through the steps of evaluating, did you seek another place that you already own that could still do this?
Mhm.
So this is a process that happens when a party opponent is opposing based on the presence of species or their habitat.
Mhm.
So it's one of the questions, and if the developer has the opportunity to do that, they say, okay, yes, I can either move this project a few feet or down the road, that then prevents them from getting a permit denial.
Does it in effect expedite their getting the approval of the permit if they have an alternate site, or do they still have to start at square one?
Potentially, I don't know if it would expedite it significantly, but you would hope that they come to the table. So the alternate the opposite sometimes happens, which is, no, this is the only site that I have for this purpose that I'm able to use it for. And so it is a high burden for the opponent, not for the applicant.
Interesting.
I think we,
That's helpful.
yeah,
Thank you.
we have I don't wanna
Yeah.
limit this discussion, but maybe you can
Talk off.
talk offline about how this is used and, we should keep moving forward with it. We've talked about tier 1A, B. Do people wanna look more at how they're defined?
Well, I hate to say this, but if we are gonna buy into the professional blurb, to do the final definition with public input, or just to draft final definitions. I don't know how productive it is to spend a lot more legislative energy on further defining what we have good drafts of at the moment. I mean, we have some good drafts of. Are we talking about tier definition? Is that what we're talking? Sorry, everybody's being
I think
quiet,
so.
so I'm thinking.
I'm just, I mean,
Okay.
there's like sequencing issues, I'm saying, I'm just looking at the actual language, I think we should just look at it.
Okay,
So we
sorry.
know what's in it.
Okay.
I'm starting on page 47, it says tier 1 areas, and it. A little bit weird, whatever, but. And is this where the like transit corridor thing made for me lives also, or is that a different place?
It's in a different place.
Maybe I think it's.
So I think we should look at tier 1A.
Which is in section 20.
It's page 47, yeah.
Wait a minute. It's section
So it's page
28,
50.
so it's page 47.
Page 50 and 51.
Areas.
So tier 1A is now a half mile around the bigger designated sectors, right?
No, tier 1, it does
That's
not
interim.
have. So,
Thank you, that's the interim measure.
yeah.
No, it says within 1/2 mile around such designated center.
Where are you looking?
The bottom of page 47.
Oh, I thought you were 50,
Yeah.
which is where the tier A, 1A definition starts.
Oh,
So,
this is just the PHPs.
Yes.
Oh, good lord. So they have a permanent. This is the permanent stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the permanent stuff only applies to PHPs?
I'm on page 50, which is the tier 1A area process, which is a permanent.
Okay, I'm on page 47, but I still need to understand. Section 29.
Okay, but that's not tier 1A. That is the interim exemptions from your bill
that's
last
what
year.
I thought.
Oh,
It's all interim.
But this is just the interim exemption for PHPs. Okay. I just wanted to start with tier 1 because I didn't know the exemptions were like fed from there now. Regional plan, future land use map review,
That's tier 1B.
okay? So. I think even with tier 1B, we thought it would start with the municipality. And it doesn't look like it does.
It does not.
People wanna,
Was that a big conversation? Did they intentionally not want it to start with municipality, somebody or some group?
Sorry.
Or I mean, was there a reason?
Well, this is there have been lots of conversations and it's changed in various proposals. This is just having it be an automatic-ish process where through the RPC map approval, tier 1B is designated unless the municipality does not want it to be.
Okay. So it's like the designations kind of.
It's like a default.
Well, yeah, like, but, which is what they're doing with the designations, they're proposing
I guess,
to do
but
that
is
now
it like a
automatically.
yes or no, like you don't want tier 1B? Or is it like we want tier 1B here and not here?
they can identify that they don't want tier 1B, but it is directly tied to their village area mapped areas. So the areas that qualify as village areas, which are currently the same definition as village centers, would then qualify as tier 1B.
But when we looked at maps from VNRC, tier 1B had a lot more than village centers in it. It had Berry Montpelier Road. It had other things mapped out. Is that vision of what tier 1B is reflected in here? Or it's just village centers?
I can't speak to what was in the VNRC map and how they mapped it.
But where does it define tier 1B?
So, on page 49, in subdivision C, the cross-reference directs that you meet the requirements for village areas that are defined in 48 AA 12C, which is on page.
It says they may have multiple non-contiguous areas that receive tier 1B area status.
Yes.
So then are they allowed, like, I don't know if D captures their ability to be flexible about where they put tier 1B and how then the RPC responds to that.
So it all happens through the RPC mapping, and so the definition is on page 87 to 88, and so yes, the municipality will be contributing to the mapping of these areas, but like all the other areas that the RPCs are mapping, it is their process, but the municipalities will be participating in it, so there will be back and forth, so it is not only the municipality deciding the boundaries of these things.
No, it's in conjunction with the RPCs, who's giving them guidance and partnering with them.
Okay, what happens to the towns that don't have zoning or planning?
So that's why the RPCs are handling all this.
So if there's a local town here that does not have zoning, the RPC will zone it for them, or they'll do the designation for them.
So they're not creating zoning for anyone. The RPCs are mapping what are currently existing in the towns,
Okay,
just like they do currently.
so they will map the 1A, 1B, 2, and 3 in that town.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm looking at page 88 where it talks about the village areas meeting certain criteria. I don't see any issue. This looks like the area where we could be clearer that they are trying to get out of a flood hazard corridor.
Well, they may not be able to get out of it, but it's a little Romanet 3.
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, they might, like,
You mean,
some of the areas that need these bylaws are inundated with flood recovery, right?
right, so right now, that what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
If you have X% of your downtown affected by being in a river corridor, you would get X%
Yeah,
swath around to be able to develop.
right. I guess I'm just curious if what is in here gives flexibility, like, does it have to be within their village center designation, or could they go outside of their village center designation? If they are like, we're pretty sure this is now a flood hazard area,
The
or
village.
do they have to have mapped it first?
So no, so there is a default that existing village centers meet this, but no, this is present and prospective. It's futurely and it's mapping.
So I think we were contemplating parallel exemption in the meantime. This is gonna take a long time.
The piece.
Where an area that has a flood hazard area gets some flexibility in their exemption to move outside of their village center. That makes sense.
Or move beyond it, it has to be contiguous, and I think, it's important it's contiguous, but I think the village centers, as we have known, are very circumscribed. I mean, mine in Woodstock, ours in Woodstock is minute. So, and I assume that most of them are pretty small. And so if it's contiguous and if you've lost like 50% of that village center because it's in the flood hazard and river corridor mapping, you should be able to get 50% contiguous to the village center that could be, as long as it's not in the flood hazard or river corridor area, to be able to develop.
So
But it has to
This
be contiguous.
it's all changing. So village centers are referenced here, but that's going away.
But it's not going for our interim measures.
So, but the size of these village areas is not defined. And I do think it's expected to be broader than just what is currently a designated village center. And I will just also point out quickly that on the top of page 89 is the last component of this, which is that there is area for infill and area be flood resistant. So I do think
Okay.
the RPCs are already thinking about this.
Mhm. Could we, I guess my question is, could we expedite this for flood impacted areas in some way? I think that's the big
Areas in
concern with the
river
long
corridors.
timeline, yeah,
Like,
right, that are looking at their flood impact.
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think municipal planning on this is already underway, but I don't know to the extent they've already.
Yeah.
Municipalities have
Okay.
made decisions on how to handle that transition.
Okay, so I guess we can let this go for now, I don't know.
Yeah, because we had some places flooded this summer.
Mm-hmm,
They may not get flooded again, they may get flooded again this year,
right,
that's the word.
That's the word. But we have other towns that are in floodplains that could be the ones that get flooded this year.
mm-hmm,
It may be the Mad River Valley that gets flooded like they did in Irene. And so you want all of the towns that are in flood areas
mm-hmm,
to be doing the planning
right,
and moving their growth
right,
out of the flood zone.
yes.
Exactly.
So it sounds like give them some credit, Natural Resources took a big look in these pages at getting people out of floodplains, even if it means getting them into Greenfield. That's what we're reading, Peter.
Yeah, so I think that the quarter and half mile circumference around villages and downtowns is an effort to give some space for
Yeah.
the fact that you're not gonna be building in these river corridors.
Right.
And then the mapping down the road is really designed to kind of do that, plan for growth for the next 20 years was the report.
Mhm.
But to do it in a more geographically based mapping exercise, right? Not just a circle, but
Mhm.
rather something
Yeah.
that is geographically appropriate.
River.
So,
Yeah.
that should account for the
Right.
lack of space in river corridors, but it's not directly in the bill.
Right, it's not immediate,
Right.
but I have let this one go. Yeah,
I think if you talk to Charlie Baker, you would see
Mhm.
that their plan is to really look for that expanded
mhm,
areas around villages and downtowns.
right. I know Ann Charlie doesn't represent, impacted communities except for Richmond in this last flood.
Mhm.
So I just don't wanna miss an opportunity for flood impacted communities to tell us that they need something sooner. Besides money, which we're also. Yeah.
Just on this
Yeah.
topic, on page 89, looking farther down at the transition or infill area,
Mhm.
the last sentence.
Yeah, I
of
was
that,
yeah,
this area could also include adjacent greenfields,
right, so
say for.
again, I think they gave it a lot of thought, this could take a long time,
Oh, totally.
is all.
Yeah.
And I just, I'm wondering if there's something we wanna expedite. And I'm thinking of your communities, because people get scared every time it rains, because their whole area.
Right, well, we did
get
get people out of the
Yeah.
floodplain, but it took 10 years.
Right, well, I'm Londonderry's in your district too, right?
No, but I care about them.
Are you Londonderry?
Yeah.
What?
Sorry,
On what?
No, that's it.
you represent Londonderry.
Well, not anymore.
Who represents?
It's,
Is it Bennington?
Bennington. Dick and Brad.
Okay, well, anyway,
But I care about.
we care,
Londonderry
yeah,
because
I care, we
they-
care.
did represent them and they're right next to Weston, and yes, we care because Weston's got hammered
Yes,
just like it's
that's
done in there. It's that river corridor,
Right,
it's just.
Well, on both sides of that mountain, because
yeah.
one goes down,
Yeah.
and up and down. and
Okay, so I'm just gonna put the question out there, is there more we could do for flood impacted communities to expedite
This.
growth outside of their perceived
I think
hazard area?
all of the interim measures are helping all our communities,
Mhm.
including
Right.
our flood impacted. I wouldn't worry too much about specifically flood impacted because the flood impact that downtowns tend to equate to the ones in the river corridors for whom we need to make an additional opportunity to grow.
Okay, so we're letting that one go.
I think so.
That particular language there, we're
Yeah.
being okay with it, is that what you're
Yes, not trying to,
Play with it, but.
Right.
So
but
this
move
is,
on my brilliant idea.
And while we're on that
Yeah.
page, and
Yes.
I know
so what
that's-
page are we
it's a
on?
hazard,
Are we
we
still
can
on
do that.
80?
89, but this is new stuff, so I would like to understand. Sure. The resource-based recreation areas, these areas include large-scale resource-based recreational facilities. It's line 14.
Yep.
Often concentrated around ski resorts, lake shores, concentrated trail networks that may provide infrastructure, jobs, or housing to support recreational activities. Can you, like, I have an idea of what I think this means, but I have learned to ask you first before I
So this,
guess.
the section that we're in broadly are the land use categories for regional plan
Right,
maps. And so this is a category that regional plans will kind of.
So may provide infrastructure. Does that mean they could be required to provide infrastructure? I mean, what
No,
is
it means
that
they get an
relationship?
exemption because they may need to do that. I'm thinking of like, really?
Okay, it's not,
Just been-
No, this is just mapping. So the may is to look at, oh, it may also include infrastructure, jobs and housing.
Right,
For when they look at it, it is not requiring these areas to do anything. It is when they're looking at the features on the landscape, how to determine what category they fall into.
It's not
it's
permissive.
the goal to
it
give them more
says they like-
flexibility to
They
develop
like
that.
that in that.
Is it a
This
tier
is
1B?
This is just about mapping. This
Oh.
is not jurisdictional. This is just about what is on maps.
so that would allow them to map the housing, for example, that supports the ski resort.
Yeah.
I thought this
Part
was
of
tier
the
1B.
ski resort.
This
And
is,
ski resorts are putting in workforce.
Yes. because the area.
Well,
And regular.
sometimes they do,
So the area around a ski resort might not qualify as a village
okay,
or downtown because it is disconnected from other site feature, landscape features. So this we're just talking about mapping, describing locations.
okay, and the physical components, not the
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're moving on from the land use categories, but they're helpful to have sorted out and see where they are. I think we've.
Do you wanna go back to your 1A, 1B? Because
Yeah.
we went ahead. but-
Yeah, no, I'm going back to where I was, and we have not had significant time with tier 1A and B is my overarching concern. So. We were on the land use map. And our concern was still that municipalities are responding to that.
Yeah, on page 49. is where we
Yes.
were.
So let's continue to think about that, how we can find common ground, and then go to tier 1A status. Okay, already they can't apply it till 2026. Sorry.
Well, we wanted that
Back
to
on
be
40.
earlier.
Huh?
We're on page 50 now, line 5.
Yeah.
And I think what, okay, so it was this, they wanted this to be earlier so that we could,
I mean, the
Expedite housing.
question to me is the balance of, do we have really strong exemptions in what's contemplated to be 1A? Or do we expedite the status, which is hard to do if we've asked the LURB. Do you want to be called that right now? Or you want to be called
I think it is.
That's the
It does
NRB
sound good gap.
Right. to, and I love how one of Senator Bray's things is like, should we rename all this stuff? And I'm like, please let me be part of that conversation. But this is probably a reason to make the exemption stronger, more than to mess with the date of this, because we've just said we want a process for all the tiers that
The interim.
fit together. Yes.
No, I just think, because we have permanent
Mm-hmm.
exemption, I think we need to remember to go. I think that is the cart before the horse. We need you guys to do that, waiting for all the tiers. And I think. Yeah.
We're not, otherwise, we're
More
essentially, I will just say, we're not going to build housing at the rate we need to say we've met anything close to the crisis that we're in. Is it making it better? Not if we wait till 2026 to talk about what's tier 1A, which is almost exclusively designated areas. And then say you can only build up to 75 units in a designated area where there's no land use question.
I mean, that's been fundamental question.
Yeah.
Said right from the very beginning, that time is the quantity that's gonna make the difference in
Right.
solving this crisis. And
So I'll
under
think,
some odd pages here.
Yeah.
of, stuff that people have to comply with, understand, learn about,
Right.
devise, design, and
Mhm.
it's a nightmare.
Yeah, so this is, I will say, this is my number one priority. I put a little priority tab to say, how serious are we about this? This is priority number one. I think people agree that we can't go home and say, we're spurring housing development at the scale we need in population centers unless we get a stronger exemption here.
And in terms of the exemption that we're talking about, how much of the land area is only that's going to cover?
0.3%
0.3% is what. we had in the bill last
40 square mile.
I'm sorry, I think we worry too much about that. Manhattan is not very much land.
Well,
And
Manhattan
you
isn't very
compare
much
the
land, but
population-
how does this help Starksboro? How does it help Berkshire?
But
How
that
does it
is
help
what
all of
work
these
is gonna
small
have to
towns?
do.
How does it help rural Vermont?
It's gonna help rural Vermont a lot by
Right.
identifying areas that they can build in. Yes.
I
but it's
still have
not
as an accompanying priority, getting to 30 by 2 by municipality for PHPs in rural areas. I don't think they can be left out of. I don't know if I've articulated that yet, but that's still in my mind.
So,
Yeah,
given that it's 5 of 12 or 6 of 12 or
it's
whatever.
9 of 12.
9 of 12, yes, I know this. Well, we just need to
Whatever.
fix this clock. Could we just identify our takeaways from this meeting?
Housing development, right?
Right,
Because I think we have a pretty clear sense of how
mhm,
with identifying the interim exemptions and making sure they're fulsome enough and they go long enough. Then, right,
yes, the only outstanding thing for me that I noted is we've not had any time with the designated areas language.
right, right.
I just wanna fly by that and then get to, but like.
And those are important for the interim exemptions.
Yes, they were important for everything in their own jurisdiction. So-
I agree.
Can we just glance at that, like 2-minute glance at that, and then I will take.
And then let's do the summary of what
Yes.
we
Right.
kind of where we've landed on some stuff. Good having Pete over there because I see what he's agreeing.
Peter.
Okay, so designated areas are,
It starts in section 65 of the bill.
which is page,
Past 100.
109.
Because 109, yeah.
Yeah, 109, and the language starts on 110.
So I think we know did this change a lot from 687?
The department recommended changes that were incorporated.
Okay.
to Hopefully clarified,
Okay. So we have some definitions to blur.
Community investment program, I don't remember.
We're
that.
starting on page 109.
so we're
Yeah, so we don't have
this is renaming the downtown program, the downtown board, to the community investment program and community investment board.
So it's downtown tax credits, essentially.
That's part of it, yeah.
Yeah, so the former state designated downtown village centers and new town centers shall be designated center one system.
So we're gonna keep flying by, okay, here.
So it has the board, it adds a few members to the board. And then it streamlines the existing designation program. Currently, there are 5 designations. This is streamlining it into 2.
And so far, this is all part of the report recommendation.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So these designations will now happen automatically through the RPC mapping process, when the blurb approves them. The downtown board, which is being renamed to the community investment board, will primarily only be in charge of awarding incentives and grants, including the tax credits. So it would be an automatic designation process, so the towns do not have to affirmatively do anything to get these designations. Under the center designation, if they'd like to do additional things, there is a step program, which the more steps that you reach, the more incentives you'll be eligible for.
These are new things called steps.
Yes, though it does roughly correlate to village centers and downtowns.
Okay,
Okay.
and where are you? Cause I don't see
The
any.
benefit steps on page 117.
Reading too closely here. What? That's, aha. Got it.
I'm reading over this, and I will say, I just have this lingering concern for a while, about how you potentially lose the benefits of these designations if you are reducing your housing stock or acting in bad faith in any way with the Home Act or our future housing bill. That is happening. And we don't have a lot of ways to say, like, you shouldn't get significant state investment if you're actually not meeting the spirit of the law. So I'm just saying that.
You mean consequences to either inaction or reducing or.
Yes, going
sliding.
against the provisions of the Home Act or.
So we should think about consequences.
I'm asking DHCD to look at this too, and it may not have to this year. But I feel like it's missing because we know of communities that are not meeting the spirit of the Home Act, and I think that should be a question about whether or not you receive state and federal infrastructure dollars.
Culture as in roads.
Well, the benefits under this, which are more like competitive infrastructure and tax credits.
Yeah, the lots of benefits to if you don't put on it.
There was a section about that somewhere.
Well, so the loss of benefits only occurs if the regional plan map is not approved.
Okay.
That actually concerns me, if it is what I think. But I don't know if we have time to look at that now, but that's on my list.
Yeah, let's put it on the list for like Charlie and Alex, and because we never got time with this.
Right, well, and
It makes sense, that we wanna ask.
yeah, I would,
Do you have a question? or-
yeah, does it mean, I don't know where it is exactly, but when I saw it, it talked about just state financial support, and I was concerned that it might be like the road,
Yeah.
the annual road payments and things like that.
No, if the
Where, you know where it is? Looks like-
it's in. If the designation is, the only way for the designations to be lost is if the regional plan map does not get approval from the board. So if it fails to meet the requirements, and then what happens is these associated incentives with that benefit are lost. So it's only the things that the town are eligible or receiving
because they have the designation that it lost.
Okay,
Not generally.
okay, good.
But there's currently no way to say, you know what? You had this designated area, but we only have so many tools in the toolbox to say your regional planning commission is even concerned that you're losing housing. Or you're not
Yeah,
complying.
and I still wanna look at that. the
Yeah,
other
let's look at
language, Because I just have a concern that if the regional plan isn't compliant, that then
Right.
we're punishing the municipality.
Yeah, we should look, that's interesting fact.
No, I agree.
I'm looking at this municipal technical assistance report.
Okay.
I don't like
pages-
report.
What pages?
130.
I'm impressed you can talk and read at the same time.
Don't be.
You know,
Telling me things. But I think our proposal in the PTT is the only proposal that increases the funding for municipal and regional planning. There's a resilience fund, but it's not an appropriation that comes with new money. It's repurposing actually.
Well, in our gov ops, it's like at $15 million.
Well, I'm saying ours
Right.
has some path. And if we are giving new money for municipal and regional planning, do we wanna think about, this is
This was our baby,
this is our jurisdiction,
and they've been so successful.
not just saying there's a report, but like they have to.
They don't need a report, they just need to continue the work.
Well, they need to continue to work and we need to talk to our municipal folks about who needs the money the most to meet the mapping and standards of the bill, and if we wanna steer or prioritize those dollars.
Probably the ones who have forest towns who have the least ability and.
Right.
And most.
Exactly. I know that the rural caucus, I don't know. I believe that the rural caucus has wanted to start with communities that have no zoning and bylaws as getting first
Oh,
priority.
that we could prioritize those.
Yeah.
That's fine, but I think actually our county,
Mhm.
the range of towns that have taken advantage of these have been wide. I mean, it's not just the most, because I think a lot of our smaller, least resource towns
Mhm.
realize this is a great opportunity for help.
Well, we just need to make sure they get it because they don't have professional staff to prepare for it.
And we did it as bylaw, I mean, this was done,
Yeah.
as bylaw initially.
Right, but
Remember?
what the rural caucus said was, let's please start with those who have nothing, not the updating folks.
Right.
You know, and that's
I'm
something
happy
we
to do
might
that for this year, but where's the money here, because we need to put
There's
the 1.3.
So we have to put the money in
Was it one-
finance,
Yeah, 1.5, wasn't it, or
1.7. I'm not sure.
Anyway, it was over $1 million.
So frankly,
So prioritize those
Yeah.
with nothing.
right, and if GovOps wants to fly by on this section and you wanna liaise, great. But municipal assistance for development is our jurisdiction and GovOps jurisdiction.
Yeah,
So
I'm happy
tell
to
GovOps.
talk to
like,
Bruce about this, so.
Yeah. That takes us through everything I have flagged. We still need to all read
Give it
it.
a moment,
Yeah,
we're just.
yes, actually, let's give a forum, but yeah.
But I would suggest, could we just quickly, have you and Magali type up the priorities we talked about, just all of us confirm and weigh in on it? Cause we didn't ever get a chance
Yeah.
to summarize our
We,
priorities.
I don't think we can do that before we end today. I have written them down and
Yeah.
I have to send them to Magali in like a format that works with our.
Right.
Like, I always do things in spreadsheets and I can't just share them with her because they're not secure, so. I have,
We went through this before.
yes, I have to sort this out. But I will share it with everyone. We'll have our own list that circulates the building perhaps. And then I really need to understand more, we all do, I suppose, of what Senator Bray would like to further consider, because a lot of section. So I don't have an answer on how we share our feedback and come together, but that is the